Some queens wear crowns, others wear chains. The day Queen Alara Vance stood in the throne room and told her husband the truth, that she'd rather burn the palace down than spend another night pretending to love him, was the day Valthera's Iron Kingdom began to crack. What you're about to hear isn't some fairy tale where the princess gets saved. This is the story of a woman who saved herself, a king too blind to see what he was losing, and the stranger who walked into their gilded hell and dared to light a match. Stay until the end to find out how far she went to reclaim her soul. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see who's riding this storm with us. The Grand Hall of Valthera stank of power and polish, two things Alara had learned to hate in equal measure. She stood 3 paces behind King Roderick Hale, exactly where protocol demanded, her spine straight as a blade despite the corset cutting into her ribs. The court sprawled before them like a feeding pit, nobles in silk and velvet watching her husband with the hungry eyes of carrion birds. Roderick spoke, his voice rolling across marble and gold leaf, each word a hammer strike. The northern territories will submit, or they will bleed. The lords applauded. Of course they did. They'd applaud if he announced he was burning orphanages for sport. Alara's fingers twitched against the folds of her gown, deep emerald today, chosen by Roderick's steward because apparently queens didn't get to pick their own damn clothes anymore. She'd argued once, 2 years into this joke of a marriage. The steward had smiled that patient smile servants reserved for mad dogs and difficult women. His Majesty prefers you in jewel tones, Your Grace. His Majesty. As if Roderick was some distant god instead of the man who couldn't remember the last time he'd looked her in the eye. The memory tasted like ash. Your Grace? Alara blinked. Lord Torvin stood before her, old enough to be her grandfather and twice as lecherous. His bow was shallow, barely respectful. Forgive me. Her voice came out smooth, trained, dead. My mind wandered. To pleasant thoughts, I hope? Torvin's gaze dropped to her neckline just long enough to make it deliberate. Though I imagine a young queen finds much to occupy her in these halls. Young queen. Like she was a child playing dress-up. She was 26 for fuck's sake, and she'd negotiated 3 trade agreements that kept this kingdom's coffers from running dry while Roderick played soldier. But sure, she was just some pretty decoration. The kingdom keeps me quite engaged, my lord. Torvin chuckled, the sound wet and knowing. I'm sure it does. She wanted to claw his eyes out. Instead, she smiled because that's what good queens did. They smiled while men reduced them to furniture. The hall doors crashed open. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-syllable. Even Roderick paused, his proclamation about northern blood sacrifice hanging unfinished in the air. A man strode through the entrance, and Alara felt something shift in her chest, something she'd thought Roderick had killed years ago. Curiosity. The stranger wasn't tall by warrior standards, maybe 6 feet, but he moved like violence in waiting. Dark hair pulled back from a face all sharp angles and old scars. His clothes were road-worn leather and practical wool, nothing like the peacock display the court favored. A sword hung at his hip, the kind that got used, not the ceremonial garbage the nobles carried. He walked straight toward the throne, and Alara watched 20 hands drift to 20 worthless ornamental hilts. Your Majesty? The stranger's bow was precise, military. Kael Arden, reporting as ordered. Roderick's expression didn't shift, it never did, but Alara caught the slight tension in his jaw. Her husband didn't like surprises. You're late, Arden. The northern roads are shit, Your Majesty. Begging your pardon. Kael straightened, meeting the king's stare without flinching. Took longer than expected to not get murdered by bandits. A ripple of scandalized whispers rolled through the court. Nobody talked to Roderick like that. Nobody talked to kings like that. Alara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. Roderick's fingers drummed once against the throne's armrest, the only outward sign of irritation he ever allowed himself. Lord Cassian recommended you highly. He claims you have an exceptional mind for strategy. Lord Cassian's generous. I'm adequate at not getting people killed unnecessarily. How refreshing. This from Duke Merrick, Roderick's cousin and professional ass-kisser. A strategist with humility. Will wonders never cease? Kael didn't look at Merrick, didn't acknowledge him at all. His attention stayed locked on Roderick, respectful but not servile. It was such a small thing, that refusal to play court games, and it hit Alara like a fist to the stomach. When was the last time someone in this palace had been real?
You'll advise the War Council, Roderick said. Lord Harwin will provide details. We're finished here. Dismissal. Just like that. The king rose, and the court rose with him in a synchronized wave of silk and subjugation. Alara moved on autopilot, 3 paces behind, always 3 paces, as Roderick descended from the dais. She felt eyes on her as she passed. Cale Arden's eyes. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. Queens didn't stare at strange men, even if those men looked at them like they were actual people instead of crown accessories. But her heart was beating faster than it had in months, and she hated herself a little for it. The queen's apartments were a masterpiece of architecture and isolation. Alara dismissed her attendants the moment the doors closed, needing silence like other people needed air. The room stretched around her, sitting chamber, dressing room, library, bedroom, all decorated in that suffocating opulence Roderick thought she wanted. Gold and crystal and imported tapestries depicting mythical bullshit about loyal wives and noble kings. She'd tried hanging her own art once. Landscapes from her childhood home, rough and real. Roderick had them removed within a week. Not appropriate for a queen's chambers, he'd said. The only time he'd visited her rooms that month. Now she sank into the chair by the window, the one piece of furniture she'd fought to keep, and stared out at Valthera's sprawling capital. The city glittered in the fading light, thousands of lives playing out below while she rotted in this golden cage. 3 years. 3 years married to Roderick Hale, and she couldn't remember the last time he'd asked her opinion on anything that mattered. He consulted his generals, his advisors, his fucking stable master more than he consulted his wife. She'd brought agricultural reforms to him once, proposals that could have fed thousands. He'd glanced at her notes for maybe 10 seconds before handing them to an undersecretary. "I'm sure it's fine, Alara. Handle it however you see fit." Like she was requesting new curtains instead of trying to save lives. A knock shattered her spiral. "What?" The word came out sharper than intended. The door cracked open. Mira, her youngest handmaid, peeked through. "Your Grace, the king requests your presence at dinner." Requests, as if Alara had a choice. "When?" "Within the hour, Your Grace. He's bringing the new strategist." Alara's stomach did something complicated. "Fine." The blue gown. Mira hesitated. His Majesty's steward suggested the silver, the shkia blue gown. It was petty, childish, a tiny rebellion that meant nothing in the grand scheme of Roderick's suffocating control. But right now, picking her own damn dress felt like revolution. Mira curtsied and fled. Alara closed her eyes and tried to remember who she'd been before this. Before the marriage alliance that saved her bankrupt family and sold her soul. She'd been fierce once. Hopeful. She'd believed she could be a queen who mattered, who changed things. What a stupid fucking girl she'd been. Dinner was intimate by palace standards, just 12 people around a table that could have seated 40. Alara arrived exactly on time, which meant 5 minutes early by Roderick's standards. He sat at the head already, reading dispatch reports while servants arranged crystal and silverware with choreographed precision. He didn't look up when she entered. She took her seat at the opposite end, 17 feet of polished mahogany between them. Might as well have been 17 miles. The other guests filtered in. Duke Merrick and his simpering wife, Lord Harwin, with his war council scowl. Lady Fentress, who never shut up about her son's military careers. And Kyle Arden, still in his road clothes, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the 5 forks laid before him. Their eyes met across the table. Something electric shot through Alara's chest, and she looked away fast enough to give herself whiplash. "Get it together," she told herself. "He's just a man. You've met 1,000 men." But none of them had looked at her the way he had in the throne room. Like she existed. Like she mattered. Roderick set down his papers. "Gentlemen, Lady Fentress, my queen." That last part added like an afterthought. "Master Arden has agreed to advise on our northern campaign. Lord Harwin, brief him on current dispositions." And just like that, the table exploded into military talk. Troop movements and supply lines and whether the mountain passes would hold through winter. Alara had heard it all before. Could probably recite half the strategic considerations from memory given how many war councils she'd sat through silently. Nobody asked her opinion. They never did. She pushed food around her plate, some kind of quail in reduction sauce that probably cost more than a farmer's monthly income, and tried not to think about how many hours she'd have to smile and nod before she could escape. "Your Grace," Alara's head snapped up. Cale was looking directly at her, ignoring Lord Harwin mid-sentence. "I apologize for interrupting," Kyle continued, "but I understand you've spent time in the Northern Territories." The table went quiet. Shocked quiet. You could have heard a pin drop in the next county. Alara stared at him. Yes. 2 years ago. Diplomatic tour." "What's the terrain like around Frostmere? The maps show mountains, but maps lie." He was asking her. Actually asking her, like her answer mattered. Roderick's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Alara's pulse hammered. Deceptive. The maps show one range, but there are 3 false peaks that hide the real barriers. Most invading forces get lost in the secondary range and starve before reaching actual settlements. Cale leaned forward. "Defended?" "Not heavily. They don't need to be. The land itself kills most threats." "But you made it through." "I had local guides, people who knew the safe passes." She met his gaze steadily. "People willing to talk to me instead of assuming I was decorative." Dead silence. Then Kyle smiled, sharp and genuine and completely inappropriate for formal dinner. "Sounds like you're the expert we need, Your Grace." Lord Harwin cleared his throat. "Master Arden, while the Queen's observations are noted, perhaps we should focus on military intelligence rather than tourist impressions." Alara felt something cold settle in her gut. The same dismissal, different words. She started to retreat, to smile and nod and disappear like a good invisible queen. But Kyle wasn't done. "Tourist impressions." He repeated the phrase like he was examining something rotten. "Lord Harwin, you've commanded how many northern campaigns?" Harwin bristled. 3, though I fail to see, and lost how many men to those deceptive mountains Her Grace just described? Harwin's face went purple. We faced unexpected resistance. You faced geography you didn't understand because you didn't bother asking someone who'd actually been there. Cale turned back to Alara. "Your Grace, if you'd be willing, I'd value your insight on the northern approach. Formal consultation, properly credited." She couldn't breathe. Nobody spoke to the King's War Council like this. Nobody elevated the Queen's voice above the generals. Roderick set down his fork with precise care. "Master Arden," every syllable dripped ice. "Your enthusiasm is noted. However, you'd do well to remember that Queen Alara's duties occupy her fully. We have cartographers and scouts for tactical planning." "There it is," Alara thought bitterly. "Shut her up. Keep her quiet. Keep her useless." "Of course, Your Majesty." Kael's voice stayed level, though I'd argue that first-hand diplomatic experience is worth a dozen scouts who've never spoken to a northerner without a sword drawn. "Your argument is irrelevant." Roderick picked up his wine glass. Conversation over. "Alara has social obligations?" "Lady Fentress, I believe you were discussing the spring festival?" And just like that, Alara ceased to exist again. Lady Fentress launched into some tedious monologue about flower arrangements and parade routes. The men returned to their war talk, Kael included, though Alara caught him glancing her way more than once. She sat frozen, rage and something else, something dangerously close to hope, warring in her chest. Roderick had just reminded her, in front of everyone, that her purpose was to look pretty and plan parties, that her knowledge, her experience, her mind didn't matter. But Kael had asked, had listened, had treated her like an equal. It was such a small thing. It was everything. The dinner dragged on for 2 more hours, an eternity of forced laughter and political maneuvering that made Alara want to scream. By the time Roderick finally released them, her face ached from maintaining the pleasant mask. She escaped to the gardens. The palace grounds at night were her sanctuary, the one place she could breathe without someone watching, judging, correcting. She followed the path to the eastern terrace, heels clicking against stone, and let the cool air wash over her. "Your Grace!" Alara spun. Kael stood in the shadows near the hedge line, arms crossed, looking like he'd been waiting. "Master Arden." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You shouldn't be here. The gardens after dark are forbidden to everyone except the royal family. I know. Guard told me."
He stepped into the moonlight. Figured you might tell me yourself if you actually wanted me gone. Dangerous. This was dangerous. Being alone with a man who wasn't her husband, who looked at her like she was worth looking at. She should walk away, should summon guards, should remember her place. Why did you do that? The question escaped before she could stop it. At dinner. Why ask me? Kael's expression shifted, something like anger flickering across his scarred features. Because you knew the answer and everyone else was talking out their asses. That's not... Lord Harwin has years of experience. Lord Harwin's a pompous idiot who gets soldiers killed because he's too arrogant to listen to anyone ranked below him. Kael's voice stayed quiet, but steel ran through it. You think I didn't do my research before coming here? I know exactly how many men Valthera's lost in the north. And I know the king's wife spent 2 years working the diplomatic channels that kept the northern lords from open rebellion. Alara's breath caught. How? Lord Cassian actually talks to people instead of at them. He mentioned you. Said you were the only reason half those territories still send grain south. Kael took a step closer. Said the king didn't notice. The words hit like a physical blow. That's... She struggled for composure. That's not appropriate conversation, Master Arden. Probably not. I'm not great with appropriate. Another step. He was close enough now she could see the scars mapping his face, a thin line across his jaw, another through his eyebrow. But I am great at recognizing when talented people are being wasted. You don't know me. No. But I know what I saw tonight. His gaze held hers, unflinching. I saw a woman who knows more about the northern territories than anyone in that room. I saw a queen who's been trained to shut up and smile while men make decisions based on incomplete information. And I saw a husband who can't be bothered to ask his wife what she thinks. Alara's hands were shaking, with rage, with fear, with something she didn't dare name. You should go, she whispered, before someone sees. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Bullshit. The word cracked through the night. What you want is the only thing that matters, Your Grace. No one had said anything like that to her in 3 years. No one had implied her wants, her thoughts, her goddamn existence had value beyond her title. She was going to cry, and she refused to cry in front of this stranger who saw too much. Good night, Master Arden. She fled before he could respond, nearly running back to the palace, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Behind her, she heard him call out, soft enough the guards wouldn't catch it. Kael, just Kael. Masset. Alara didn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, Roderick's side cold and empty as always. He kept his own chambers 3 doors down, and stared at the ceiling while her mind raced in circles. What you want is the only thing that matters. When was the last time she'd let herself want anything? Really want it, not the careful, acceptable desires a queen was supposed to have. She'd wanted to matter once, wanted to be a partner to her husband, a force for good in the kingdom. She'd wanted respect and purpose and to be more than a womb with a crown. She'd stopped wanting when wanting became too painful. But now there was this stranger, Kael, just Kael, who'd walked into her gilded prison and asked her opinion like it was the most natural thing in the world, who'd challenged the war council on her behalf, who'd looked at her and seen someone worth listening to. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Your Grace? Mira's voice, cautious through the door. His Majesty requests your presence. Alara's stomach clenched. Roderick never came to her rooms, and she never went to his except when... Oh! It had been 6 weeks since his last summons. She'd almost let herself hope he'd forgotten about that particular duty entirely. Tell His Majesty I'll attend shortly. She forced herself upright, caught her reflection in the mirror across the room. She looked like a ghost in her white nightgown, all pale skin and haunted eyes. The woman staring back wasn't the fierce girl who'd walked into this marriage believing in duty and honor. That girl was dead. Roderick had killed her inch by inch. Alara wrapped herself in a robe and walked the 3 doors to the king's chambers on autopilot. The room was dark except for a single candle. Roderick sat at his desk, still working through papers, not even looking up when she entered. Lock the door. She obeyed. 3 years had trained obedience into her bones. He finally glanced at her, and there was nothing in his eyes. No warmth, no desire, nothing except clinical assessment. The council expects an heir. It's been 3 years. Not I want you, not I've missed you. Just the kingdom's expectations and her failure to produce results.
I'm aware, Your Majesty.
Then you understand why this is necessary. Necessary. Like she was a broodmare, like this was a diplomatic function instead of intimacy. Alara made herself nod. Roderick stood, began unbuttoning his shirt with the same efficiency he brought to signing decrees. I'll try to be quick. And there it was, the summary of their entire marriage. I'll try to be quick.
She climbed into his bed and stared at the ceiling while her husband performed his duty with mechanical precision. He didn't kiss her, didn't look at her except to ensure everything was positioned correctly. When he finished, he immediately withdrew, already reaching for his clothes. You can go. Alara didn't move for a long moment. Something was cracking inside her chest, something that had been fracturing for years finally reaching critical mass. Do you even remember my name? The question surprised them both. Roderick paused, shirt half buttoned. What? My name. My actual name, not my title. She sat up, not bothering to cover herself because modesty seemed absurd at this point. When was the last time you said it? Alara. Your name is Alara. He said it like she was being difficult. Is this about dinner? This is about the fact that you just fucked me like I was a piece of furniture and can't understand why I might want... She stopped, swallowed. Never mind. No, please, continue. Ice in every syllable. What is it you want, Alara? More jewelry? A larger staff? Perhaps we should expand your apartments. I want you to see me. The words exploded out, 3 years of silence shattering. I want you to ask my opinion on something that matters. I want to be more than a decoration you wheel out for ceremonies and fuck when the council complains about heirs. Roderick's expression didn't change, didn't crack. He finished buttoning his shirt with infuriating calm. You're overwrought. Understandable, given the late hour. He moved to his desk, already dismissing her. Get some rest. We have the finance minister's breakfast tomorrow. Roderick, that's enough. Not yelled. Roderick never yelled, but the command in his voice was absolute. You're my wife, my queen. You have duties, same as I do. If you're unhappy with the arrangement, I suggest you remember what your family gained from this marriage. The threat landed like a slap. Her father's debts, paid. Her sister's dowry secured. Her mother's medical care, funded. All bought with Alara's freedom. She'd known. She'd always known this was transactional, but hearing him weaponize it, throw her family's needs in her face to justify his neglect, something inside her died completely. Of course, Your Majesty. Her voice came out dead. Forgive me. She dressed in silence while Roderick returned to his papers, already forgotten. When she reached the door, his voice stopped her. That strategist, Arden. Her pulse spiked. Yes? Keep your distance. The man's competent, but he lacks proper respect for protocol. Roderick didn't look up. I won't have you embarrassed by association. He knows. The thought screamed through her mind. He saw Kael at dinner, saw the conversation, and this is his response. I understand. She fled before her composure shattered entirely. Back in her own rooms, Alara dismissed Mira with a sharp word and locked herself in. Then, finally alone, she let herself break. She didn't cry. Crying was for people who still had hope. Instead, she stood at her window and watched Valthera's lights, while rage and despair fought for dominance in her chest. Roderick owned her body, her name, her future. He just made that crystal clear. She was property, bought and paid for, and any attempt to be more than that was an embarrassment he wouldn't tolerate. And Kael had been right there in the garden, asking what she wanted like it mattered, and she'd run because she was too broken to imagine anything different. The knock came just after midnight. Alara ignored it, probably Mira, checking if she needed anything, as if anything could help. Your Grace, not Mira's voice, deeper. It's Kael. I know I shouldn't be here, but open the door, please. Her heart stopped. This was insane. If anyone saw him outside her chambers at midnight, the scandal would destroy them both. Roderick would have him executed. She'd be locked away, divorced, ruined. She opened the door. Kael stood in the corridor still in his dinner clothes, expression grim.
His eyes dropped to her face, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. What did he do? Nothing. The lie tasted like poison. You need to leave. Elara, hearing her name from his mouth, without the title, without the careful distance, it broke something fundamental in her. He reminded me that I'm property, she heard herself say. That I exist because my family needed money and he needed a womb. And he's right. That's all I am. She was shaking now, couldn't stop. So thank you for tonight, for pretending I matter, but we both know it's not real. Kale moved before she could react, stepping into her chambers and closing the door behind him. They were alone now, truly alone, and this was suicide for them both. Listen to me. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I don't know what poison that bastard's been feeding you, but you are not property. You are not worthless. You're brilliant and strong and wasted on a man too blind to see what he has. You don't know. I know enough. I know you brokered the Northern Peace that saved thousands of lives. I know you proposed agricultural reforms that Roderick shelved because they came from you instead of his advisors. I know you're dying in this palace while he parades you around like a trophy. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. And I know that's fucking wrong. Elara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His touch was burning her. His words were destroying every wall she'd built to survive, and she needed him to stop before she did something catastrophic. Kael, tell me to leave. His voice dropped to a whisper. Tell me you want me gone, and I'll go. But if there's any part of you that wants something different, something real, she kissed him. God help her, she kissed him like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline, all desperation and hunger and 3 years of starvation. His arms locked around her, pulling her against him, and she felt alive for the first time since her wedding night. This was treason. This was death. This was the end of everything. She didn't care. Kale kissed like he fought. No hesitation, no apology, just raw, honest want. His hands mapped her spine through the thin robe while she fisted her fingers in his hair, trying to get closer, trying to disappear into this moment before reality crashed back in. He broke away first, breathing hard, resting his forehead against hers. Elara, God, we can't. If anyone finds out, I know. Her voice shook. I know what this costs. Then why? Because I'm already dead. The truth ripped out of her. I'm already dying here, inch by inch. At least this way I get to choose how I burn. Kale pulled back enough to search her face. Whatever he found there made his expression crack open, something like anguish bleeding through. This is going to destroy us both. I know. Your husband will kill me. I know. And you, he'll lock you away, divorce you, ruin you. I know. She grabbed his shirt, holding on like he might disappear. But right now, in this moment, I choose this. I choose you. I choose being seen as a person instead of a possession. Her voice broke. Please, let me have this one thing. The war played out across his face, honor versus want, duty versus desire. Then he kissed her again, softer this time, like she was something precious instead of just available. We're going to hell for this, he murmured against her mouth. Then at least I'll burn knowing what it felt like to be wanted. They made it to her bed, shedding clothes with shaking hands. And when Kael touched her, really touched her, like her pleasure mattered, like she mattered, Elara finally understood the difference between being used and being wanted. Roderick had taken, Kael gave. Afterward, she lay in his arms while dawn crept toward the horizon, knowing this was borrowed time. Knowing the moment anyone discovered them, both their lives were forfeit. We can't do this again, she whispered. Kael's arms tightened around her. I know. Someone will notice. Someone always notices. I know. It has to be. Elara. He turned her to face him. I'm not sorry. I should be, but I'm not. Whatever happens next, I'm not sorry for this. She touched his face, memorizing the scars, the sharp angles, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. Neither am I. They were so fucked. But as the first light of dawn painted her chambers gold and Kael held her like she was worth protecting, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It would probably kill them both,
But God, it felt good to hope again. The morning after was a special kind of torture. Kale left before the servants woke, slipping out through the garden entrance like a thief. Alara dressed in her court armor, sapphire gown, hair pinned until it hurt, diamonds at her throat, and prepared to smile through another day of being invisible. The finance minister's breakfast was exactly as tedious as expected. Alara sat beside Roderick while old men argued about tax revenues and trade tariffs. She contributed nothing, because nothing was expected from her except to look appropriately regal and pour tea at the correct intervals. Across the table, Kael caught her eye once. Just once, for barely a heartbeat. But the heat in his gaze nearly undid her. She looked away fast enough to spill tea on the tablecloth. "Careful, my dear." Roderick's hand covered hers, steadying the pot. His touch was ice compared to Kael's fire. "You seem distracted." "Forgive me, Your Majesty, I slept poorly." "Perhaps you should rest." Dismissal wrapped in false concern. "These discussions bore you." "I negotiated 3 treaties and saved your northern territories," she wanted to scream. "I could explain these tariff structures better than half your ministers." Instead, she smiled. "You're very thoughtful, husband." She excused herself before she broke something. The corridors were quiet this time of morning, most of the court still pretending to care about finance policy. Alara walked with no destination, just needing movement, needing to process the catastrophic mistake she'd made last night. She'd committed treason, broken her marriage vows, risked everything for one night with a man she barely knew, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. God help her. "Your Grace." She spun. Lady Meridian stood behind her, one of Roderick's older cousins and the palace's most accomplished gossip. Her smile was all teeth. "Lady Meridian." "Lovely breakfast, wasn't it? Though I noticed you left early." Meridian's eyes glittered. "Not feeling well?" "Just tired." Understandable. The king's new strategist seemed quite engaging. She said it like commenting on the weather, but steel ran underneath. "Such an unusual man. Very forward. I heard he nearly challenged Lord Harwin at dinner last night." Alara's stomach clenched. "Master Arden has strong opinions. The king values directness in his advisors." "Does he?" Meridian stepped closer. "Because from where I sat, it seemed the king was quite displeased, especially when Master Arden addressed you so familiarly." This was a threat, a polite, society-wrapped threat. "I wouldn't know, Lady Meridian. I rarely presume to understand His Majesty's thoughts." "No, I don't suppose you would." Meridian's smile sharpened. "Still, best to be careful. You know how the court talks. A queen's reputation is so very fragile." She glided away, leaving Alara frozen in the corridor. She knows. The thought paralyzed her, or suspects, or is fishing. Either way, this was how it started. Whispers in corridors, knowing looks, careful insinuations. The court would eat her alive if they scented blood. Alara made it to her chambers before panic set in. She'd been so stupid, so reckless. One night of feeling wanted, and she'd risked everything. Her position, her safety, Kael's life. What had she been thinking? The answer was simple. She hadn't been thinking. She'd been feeling, for the first time in years, and it had made her careless. Now they'd both pay the price. Unless... The thought formed slowly, desperately. If she cut Kael off now, publicly, coldly, if she made it clear he meant nothing, maybe the whispers would die. Maybe Meridian would find easier prey. Maybe Roderick would never know. It would kill something inside her. But she'd been killing parts of herself for years. What was one more? The knock came just after noon. "Your Grace." Mira again, looking nervous. "Master Arden requests an audience." Of course he did, because nothing about this disaster could be simple. "Tell him I'm indisposed." He said it's urgent, regarding the northern intelligence you discussed." Clever bastard, using her knowledge as an excuse, making it official. Alara almost told Mira to send him away, almost played it safe. 5 minutes, and leave the door open. Kael entered looking exhausted and determined. His eyes found hers immediately, and she saw the question there. "Are you okay?" "Master Arden." She kept her voice formal, distant. "I'm told you have questions about northern geography." He played along, but she caught the hurt that flashed across his face at her tone. "Yes, Your Grace." Lord Harwin mentioned you traveled extensively through the region. I hope to clarify some strategic points. They spent 5 minutes discussing mountain passes and supply routes, Mira hovering in the doorway as chaperone. It was all perfectly proper, perfectly innocent. But when Kyl's hand brushed hers while reaching for a map, Ilara felt the touch like lightning. "Thank you, Your Grace." He bowed, formal and correct. "Your insight is invaluable." She should let him go, should maintain the distance, should save them both. "Master Arden," he paused. "Be careful. The court notices everything." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them, a warning, an apology, a promise. "I understand, Your Grace." He left, and Ilara was alone again with the weight of her choices and the certainty that this was far from over. Because whatever she'd started last night, whatever she and Kyle had ignited, it was too late to put out now. The fire was already spreading, Mnad said. The War Council meeting 3 days later was where everything started to unravel. Ilara wasn't supposed to attend. Wives didn't sit in on military strategy, even wives who'd brokered half the kingdom's northern alliances. But Kyle had specifically requested her presence, formally, through Roderick's secretary, citing her territorial knowledge as essential to the campaign. Roderick could have refused, should have refused, given his clear preference for keeping Ilara decorative and silent. But refusing would have looked weak, like he was threatened by his own wife's expertise. So she sat at the war table, the only woman in a room full of generals and strategists, while Kyle spread maps across wood scarred by decades of campaign planning. "The Northern Lords are mobilizing," Kyle said without preamble. "Our scouts confirm at least 3 armies moving toward the border." Lord Harwin snorted. "Let them come. We'll crush them in the passes like we did 5 years ago." "With respect, Lord Harwin, 5 years ago you lost 2,000 men in those passes before the Northerners even engaged you." Kyle's tone stayed level, but Ilara heard the edge underneath. "I'd prefer not to repeat that mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, it was a massacre because you didn't understand the terrain." Kyle looked directly at Roderick. "Your Majesty, we need someone who actually knows those mountains. Someone the Northern Lords might talk to instead of ambushing." Every eye in the room turned to Ilara. She felt the weight of their stares, dismissive, skeptical, annoyed. To them, she was an interloper in men's business. Roderick's expression stayed neutral, giving nothing away. "My queen is not a military strategist."
"No, she's better. She's a diplomat they trust." Kale pulled out a document, laid it on the table. "These are her negotiation records from 2 years ago. She brokered peace with 6 northern houses that Valthera had been fighting for decades. Not through force, through conversation." "How did you get those?" Ilara asked before she could stop herself.
Kale's eyes met hers. "Lord Cassian gave them to me. Said they were the best diplomatic work he'd seen in 20 years. Said the King's Council buried them." The room erupted. Harwin was shouting about protocol. Duke Merrick was demanding to know why a strategist had access to classified documents. 2 generals were arguing about whether diplomacy even mattered when swords settled disputes faster. Roderick sat silent through it all, watching Kyle with an expression Ilara couldn't read. When the shouting died, the king spoke. "Master Arden, you're suggesting we send the queen, my wife, into a war zone to negotiate with rebels who've already mobilized armies against us. I'm suggesting we try talking before we send 20,000 men to die in mountains that eat armies alive." Kyle didn't back down. "And yes, I'm suggesting the person who already earned those lords' respect might be more effective than 1,000 soldiers who don't know the terrain." "It's suicide," Harwin spat. "The Northerners will take her hostage." "They won't!" Ilara's voice cut through the room. Every head turned again. "I know these people. I spent months in their territories, earning their trust. They have legitimate grievances that no one in this palace has bothered to address." "Grievances?" Merrick's laugh was ugly. "They're traitors mobilizing against their rightful king."
"They're starving." Ilara stood, because sitting made her feel small, and she was done feeling small. "Their crops failed 3 years running. They've been begging for aid, and this council keeps voting to increase their taxes instead. So yes, they're mobilizing, because from their perspective, the choice is die slowly of starvation or die quickly fighting." Silence. Then Roderick. "You've been monitoring Northern policy?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I read reports, Alara said carefully. The ones that cross your desk? The ones you sign without reviewing because you trust your counsel more than… She stopped. Saying more than your wife would be crossing a line she couldn't uncross, but everyone heard it anyway. Roderick's jaw tightened. This council has managed the Northern Territories for decades before you arrived, Alara. I think we understand the situation. Do you? Because the situation right now is 3 armies marching south, and your plan is to repeat the same strategy that failed 5 years ago. She was shaking but couldn't stop. I'm not asking to lead troops. I'm asking to do what I'm actually good at. Talk to people who will listen to me. Out of the question. Why? Because it's dangerous. You send men into danger every day, or is it because the idea of your wife being useful threatens you? The words hit like a bomb. Several generals went pale. Merrick looked like he might faint. Lord Harwin actually stood up, outraged on the king's behalf. But Roderick just stared at her with those cold, empty eyes. Everyone out! His voice was quiet, deadly. Your Majesty, Harwin began. Out, now! The room emptied in seconds. Everyone except Kyle, who hesitated near the door. You too, Arden. Your Majesty, if I could… You've said enough. Roderick's gaze could have frozen fire. Wait outside. Kyle looked at Alara. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the urge to stay, to protect her, to damn the consequences. She gave him the tiniest shake of her head. Not now, please. He left, closing the door with a quiet click that sounded like a death knell. Alara and Roderick faced each other across the war table. I should have you locked in your chambers, Roderick said softly, for that display alone. Then do it. She was too angry to be afraid. Prove to everyone that you're so threatened by your wife having an opinion that you have to imprison her. Threatened? He stood, moving around the table with predatory grace. You think I'm threatened by you, Alara? I think you're terrified of me being anything other than a pretty accessory. Because if I'm useful, if I'm valuable, then you might actually have to see me as a person. He stopped a foot away. Up close, she could see the cracks in his control, the muscle jumping in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on his restraint. You want to be useful? His voice dropped to a whisper. You want to matter? Fine. Go north. Negotiate with the rebels. Risk your life for people who would slit your throat if they thought it would hurt me. Alara blinked. What? You heard me. Take your strategist friend, since you seem to value his opinion so highly, and handle it. Something vicious flickered in his eyes. But understand this. If you fail, if those lords humiliate you or harm you or send you back in pieces, I will not come to your rescue. You want to prove you're more than decoration? Prove it. It was a trap. Had to be. Roderick didn't suddenly grant her autonomy out of the goodness of his heart. What's the catch? No catch. Just conditions. He started counting on his fingers. You take a full guard unit. You report directly to me, not through Arden. And when, not if, when, this blows up in your face, you will never again question my judgment in council or anywhere else. You'll have proven yourself the naive idealist I always knew you were, and you'll accept your place quietly. There it was. He was calling her bluff, betting she'd fail, using her failure to break her completely. And she was going to take the bet anyway. Fine. Surprise flickered across Roderick's face, just for a second. You're serious. Dead serious. She stepped closer into his space and saw him actually lean back. I'll go north. I'll bring your rebels to the table. And when I succeed, because I will succeed, you're going to acknowledge that I'm worth more than the dowry my family paid. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Roderick smiled, cold and sharp as a blade. We'll see. He walked past her, toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing, Alara. Yes? Master Arden seems quite invested in your well-being. His tone stayed casual, but she heard the trap in it. I trust his interest is purely professional. Her blood turned to ice. He knows. Oh God, he knows. But she'd spent 3 years learning to lie with her silence. She met her husband's eyes and didn't flinch. Master Arden is invested in not repeating Lord Harwin's mistakes. Nothing more. Good.
Because if I thought otherwise, He left the threat hanging. Well, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. He left. Elara stayed frozen by the war table, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Roderick suspected. Maybe didn't have proof, but suspected enough to threaten. And she'd just agreed to ride north with Kael into hostile territory, where anything could happen and no one would question it. This was either the bravest thing she'd ever done or the stupidest. Probably both. The door opened. Kael stepped in, took one look at her face, and crossed the room in 3 strides. What did he say? He's letting us go north. Her voice shook. Letting me try to negotiate. Kael's eyes widened. That's good. That's what we wanted. He's setting me up to fail, to prove I'm useless so I'll shut up forever. Then we don't fail. His hands gripped her shoulders. Elara, listen to me. You can do this. You've done it before. That was different. We weren't. She couldn't finish. I know. His thumb brushed her jaw, achingly gentle. But we're going to figure this out. Together. He suspects about us. Kael went still. What? Not enough to act, but enough to threaten. She pulled away from his touch before she did something stupid. We have to be careful. More careful than before. Elara. I'm serious, Kael. If he gets proof, he'll kill you. And I can't. Her voice broke. I can't lose you when I just found you. He pulled her against him, and she let herself lean into his strength for just a moment. Just this one stolen second before they had to go back to being queen and strategist. Nothing more. We're going to survive this, Kael murmured into her hair. All of it. The North, Roderick, the court. We're going to win. Elara wanted to believe him, but standing in the war room where her husband had just laid a trap disguised as opportunity, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all hurtling toward disaster. And when they hit, the impact would destroy them all. Will Elara and Kael survive the journey north? What awaits them in the mountains where armies go to die? And how long before Roderick's suspicions turn to certainty? The storm is coming, and everyone in its path will have to choose. Stay safe in their gilded cages, or risk everything for the chance to finally breathe free. They left at dawn, 3 days after the council meeting that had changed everything. Elara sat astride a gray mare, dressed in riding leathers instead of silk for the first time in 3 years. The freedom of it, no corset, no jewels, no suffocating layers, felt like breathing after drowning. Behind her rode 20 of Roderick's personal guard, their armor gleaming in the weak morning light. And beside her, close enough their stirrups occasionally brushed, rode Kael. He hadn't looked at her since they'd mounted up. Professional distance, carefully maintained, but she felt his awareness like a physical touch every time their horses drew near. The palace gates opened. Beyond them stretched the northern road, winding through farmland before disappearing into the mountains that had swallowed armies whole. Your Grace, Captain Thorne, leader of the guard unit, maneuvered his horse alongside hers. He was a hard man, all scars and suspicion, and he'd made his opinion of this mission crystal clear during briefing. We should reach the first way station by nightfall. I'll need you in the center of the formation at all times. I'm not made of glass, Captain. No, Your Grace. But you are the queen, and if anything happens to you on my watch, the king will have my head. His expression suggested he thought that fate increasingly likely. Master Arden, you'll ride rear guard. Kael's jaw tightened. I should be with Her Grace. I know the route. You'll ride where I tell you. Thorne's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Or you'll ride back to the palace. Your choice. Elara watched the silent war play out across Kael's face. The urge to argue, to stay close, to protect her warring with the knowledge that pushing would only make Thorne more suspicious. Rear guard. Understood, Captain. He dropped back without meeting Elara's eyes, and she felt the distance like a knife between her ribs. This was Roderick's design. Separate them. Keep them under watch. Make sure whatever had sparked between them couldn't ignite into something that threatened his control. But her husband had made one critical mistake. He'd given them a mission that required them to work together. And in the wilderness, away from court eyes and palace protocols, things had a way of slipping control. The first 2 days passed without incident. They rode through farmland, giving way to foothills, the mountains rising ahead like jagged teeth. At night they camped in guarded circles. Alara's tent in the center, while soldiers rotated watch. She barely saw Kael except at meals, and even then, Thorn positioned himself between them like a human wall. On the third night, everything changed. The attack came just after midnight. Alara woke to screaming and the clash of steel on steel. She grabbed for the knife Kael had given her, against protocol, against everything proper, but he'd insisted and she'd hidden it under her pillow, and scrambled out of her bedroll. Outside, chaos. Dark figures moving through the camp, cutting down guards who were still struggling awake. Not Northerners. Their armor was wrong, their movements too coordinated. Assassins. Someone grabbed her from behind. Alara drove her elbow back hard, felt it connect with ribs, twisted and brought the knife up. The blade caught moonlight for a split second before she buried it in her attacker's throat. He went down gurgling. She'd never killed anyone before. Didn't have time to process it. Alara! Kael's voice raw with panic. She turned and saw him fighting through 3 attackers, his sword a blur of lethal precision. He cut through them like they were nothing, desperation making him faster than any man should be. Then Thorn was there, barking orders, rallying the guards. The assassins broke and ran, melting into the darkness as fast as they'd appeared. In the aftermath, Alara counted bodies. 5 guards dead, 7 attackers down, and Thorn bleeding from a nasty cut across his ribs, his face gray with pain. "Captain." She knelt beside him while a medic worked. "How bad?" "I'll live. Won't be riding hard for a few days, though." He grimaced as the medic stitched. "Your Grace, we need to turn back. This was a coordinated hit. Someone knew our route." "No." The word came out harder than intended. "We're 3 days from the Northern Territories. Turning back accomplishes nothing except proving whoever sent those assassins that they can scare us off." "Your Grace?" "I'm not debating this, Captain. We continue." Kyle appeared at her shoulder. Blood spattered across his face and chest, none of it his. His eyes scanned her head to toe, searching for injury. "You're hurt." Alara looked down. Blood soaked her nightshirt, but she couldn't feel any pain. "It's not mine." "The man you killed." Kael's voice was carefully neutral. "First time?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "You did good. Stayed alive. That's all that matters." Thorn's eyes narrowed, watching their exchange with new intensity. "Master Arden, see to the perimeter. Make sure they're really gone." It was dismissal. Kael knew it, but he went anyway, squeezing Alara's shoulder once before disappearing into the darkness. Thorn waited until he was out of earshot. "Your Grace, that man is in love with you." Alara's heart stopped. "I don't know what—" "Don't insult my intelligence." The captain's voice stayed low, but steel ran through it. "I've been watching. The way he looks at you, the way you look at him, and just now the way he cut through trained killers like they'd threatened his entire world." He paused while the medic tied off the stitches. "Does the king know?" This was it, the moment where everything could shatter. Alara met Thorn's eyes and made a choice. "Nothing has happened that would dishonor my vows, Captain. Master Arden and I have a professional relationship." "But you want more." She didn't answer, couldn't lie, couldn't confirm. Thorn sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 50 years. "Your Grace, I've served House Hale for 3 decades. I've watched King Roderick grow from a boy to a man to a king, and I've watched him fail you every single day of your marriage." Alara stared. "Captain, let me finish." He shifted, wincing. "I'm loyal to the crown, but I'm not blind. His Majesty treats you like property, and it's wrong. It's been wrong." He paused. "But if you and Arden cross that line, if you give the king proof of betrayal, he won't just execute Arden. He'll destroy you both in ways that make execution look merciful." "I know. Do you? Because right now, 3 days from Palace Eyes, with me injured and half the guard dead, it would be very easy to forget consequences." His gaze pinned her. "Don't. Whatever you feel, whatever he feels, don't give Roderick that weapon." Alara swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve better than you've gotten, and because I don't want to watch another good person get destroyed by that palace." He lay back, exhausted. "Now get some rest. We ride at dawn, and the mountains don't care about our drama." She retreated to her tent but didn't sleep.
just sat with her knife and the memory of how easily it had slid into flesh, wondering what the hell she'd become. Kale found her an hour before dawn. He slipped into her tent without announcement, and she should have sent him away, should have remembered Thorn's warning, but she was shaking and couldn't stop. "Hey." He knelt in front of her. "Talk to me." "I killed a man." "I know." "I didn't even hesitate. Just," she mimed the motion, "like it was nothing. Like you wanted to survive. There's no shame in that." His hands covered hers, stilling their trembling. "Alara, look at me." She did. "You did what you had to do, that's all. The guilt you're feeling, that's proof you're still human, but don't let it break you." "Thorn knows." The words tumbled out. "About us. About how you feel." Kael went very still. "What did he say?" "That we need to be careful. That Roderick will destroy us if we give him proof." She gripped his hands hard enough to hurt. "He's right. We can't. This can't. I know." "Then why are you here?" "Because you needed me." Simple. Devastating. "And I can't seem to stay away from you even when I know I should." They stared at each other in the dim tent, both breathing too hard, both balanced on a knife's edge between restraint and surrender. Alara broke first. "You need to go." "Yeah." He didn't move. "Kael, give me 1 minute, just one before we go back to pretending." His forehead touched hers. "Please." She gave him 30 seconds. 30 seconds of his arms around her, his breath against her skin, the illusion that they could be something other than doomed. Then she pulled away. "Go." He left without argument, and Alara sat alone in the darkness, trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. The mountain swallowed them on the 4th day. The terrain shifted from rolling hills to sheer cliffs and narrow passes, exactly as Alara remembered from her diplomatic tour. But remembering and experiencing were different beasts. Memory softened edges that reality made razor sharp. They rode single file through gaps barely wide enough for horses, sheer drops on one side and rock walls on the other. Thorn, still pale but refusing to slow down, led with grim determination. Kyle rode near Alara now. Thorn had quietly reassigned him after the attack, acknowledging they needed his tactical expertise more than they needed to maintain appearances. "There." Kale pointed ahead where the pass opened into a small valley. "First northern settlement should be just beyond that ridge." Alara studied the approach. "They'll have scouts. Probably already know we're here." "Good. Let them report back that the Queen came in person. Shows respect." "Or stupidity." This from one of the guards, a young soldier who'd been muttering complaints since they entered the mountains. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but we're riding straight into hostile territory with half our original force. This is suicide." Before Alara could respond, Kyle wheeled his horse around. "What's your name, soldier?" "Garrett, sir." "Well, Garrett, here's what I know. The Queen brokered peace with these territories 2 years ago using nothing but her brain and her ability to actually listen. She earned their respect the hard way. So when we ride in, we're not invaders. We're guests of someone they trust." He paused. "Unless you'd prefer Lord Harwin's approach. Send in soldiers, kill everyone who resists, and wonder why the North keeps rebelling." Garrett flushed but stayed quiet. "Thought so. Now shut up and follow orders." Thorn actually smiled, brief but genuine. "Well said, Master Arden." They crested the ridge just as the sun hit its peak. The valley below was scarred. Burned fields, collapsed buildings, evidence of recent violence everywhere. But people still moved through the ruins, rebuilding, surviving, refusing to quit despite everything. And waiting at the valley entrance, blocking the only path forward, stood a line of armed men. Thorn's hand went to his sword. Alara stopped him with a gesture. "Hold." She rode forward alone, ignoring Kyle's sharp intake of breath behind her. "I need to do this." The northern leader stepped out from the line, a big man, grizzled and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much death. Alara recognized him immediately. Lord Garrett Frost. His expression didn't shift. "You remember." "I remember everything about my time here, my lord, including the promise I made to your people." She dismounted, standing before him unarmed and unguarded. "I see that promise has been broken." "Broken, burned, and pissed on," Frost's voice carried across the valley.
Your husband's tax collectors came through last winter, took the grain we needed to survive. When my people protested, they killed 6 farmers and burned 3 homesteads as examples. Rage ignited in Alara's chest. I didn't know. Of course not. Queens don't get told about peasants dying. But his tone held more weariness than accusation. So why are you here, Your Grace? Come to watch us starve in person? I came to fix this, if you'll let me. Frost laughed, bitter and sharp. Fix it? The king sent armies. We sent them back in pieces. Now he sends his wife. What are you supposed to do, smile pretty and make us forget 3 years of suffering? No. Alara stepped closer, close enough to see the grief etched into every line of his face. I'm supposed to listen, supposed to bring your grievances directly to the king, supposed to make him understand that starving his own people is the fastest way to lose a kingdom. And you think he'll listen? I think he'll have to, because if he doesn't, I'll make it impossible for him to ignore. She held Frost's gaze. You trusted me before. Trust me again. Let me try to make this right. The silence stretched. Behind Frost, his men shifted, hands on weapons. Behind Alara, she heard horses stamping, guards preparing for violence. Then Frost sighed. You always were too damn stubborn for your own good. He turned to his men. Stand down. The queen's a guest. The tension broke like a snapped wire. Frost gestured toward the ruined village. Come on then. Let's talk about how you're going to convince your bastard husband to stop killing us. They gathered in what had been the village meeting hall, now half collapsed but still standing. Alara sat across from Frost and 3 other northern lords who'd ridden in within hours of her arrival. News traveled fast in the mountains. Kael stood behind her, silent but present. Thorn had positioned guards outside, close enough to intervene, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Tell me everything, Alara said. Don't soften it. I need to know exactly what's happened. What followed was 3 hours of horror. Tax increases that made survival impossible. Collectors who took more than they were owed and called it king's privilege. Soldiers who raped and murdered under the banner of maintaining order. Crops seized, children left hungry, families destroyed. And through it all, Alara felt fury building in her chest, hot and righteous and completely beyond her ability to control. This was Roderick's kingdom, his responsibility. And he'd let this happen, either through willful ignorance or because he simply didn't care enough to stop it. The mobilization, she said when they finished. You're preparing for war. What choice do we have? This from Lady Moraine, who ruled the Western Valleys. She was young, maybe Alara's age, with a baby on her hip and scars on her hands. We tried petitioning, tried diplomacy. Your husband ignored every messenger we sent, so we decided, better to die fighting than watch our children starve. How many soldiers? 3,000. Maybe more if the Eastern clans join. Frost met her eyes. We can't win. We know that. But we can make it cost enough that maybe, just maybe, the next king thinks twice before bleeding us dry. There won't be a next war. Alara's voice came out harder than intended. I'll make sure of it. How? Moraine's laugh was ugly. You think the king listens to his wife? Everyone knows you're just decoration, Your Grace. Pretty and useless. The words hit like a slap. But Alara had heard worse in Roderick's palace, had lived with that dismissal for 3 years. You're right. The king doesn't listen to me, doesn't value my opinion, treats me like furniture. She leaned forward. But I'm here anyway, riding through assassin-filled mountains to get to you. And I'm not leaving until we have an agreement that saves lives. What kind of agreement? Frost asked. A temporary truce. You hold your armies. I go back to the capital and force the king to address your grievances, publicly, in front of the full council where he can't bury it. And if he refuses? Then you march south, and I'll make damn sure every kingdom on this continent knows King Roderick Hale starved his own people into rebellion. She paused. But it won't come to that. Because I'm going to give him a choice. Fix this, or I destroy his reputation myself. Silence fell across the hall. Then Frost started laughing, real laughter this time, not bitter. You've got steel in you, Your Grace, more than when you visited before. 3 years married to Roderick will do that. I bet. He exchanged looks with the other lords. All right, 1 month. We hold position, don't advance. You get the king to meet our demands, grain shipments restored, taxes reduced to sustainable levels,
and his collectors leashed before they murder anyone else. Done. And if you fail? Alara smiled, and it felt dangerous on her face. Then I'll be riding south with your armies instead of against them. Frost's eyebrows shot up. That's treason. That's choosing my people over a husband who's never once chosen me. They shook on it, and for the first time in 3 years, Alara felt like she'd accomplished something that actually mattered. The celebration that night was modest. The Northerners didn't have resources for excess, but genuine. Alara sat with Frost's family, sharing watered ale and rough bread, listening to stories about crops and children and the small, stubborn hope that kept communities alive through hell. Kale found her after midnight, standing on what passed for the village wall. You did good today. She didn't turn. I bought us a month, that's all. That's everything. 1 month is enough to change Roderick's mind. You don't know my husband. Alara's laugh tasted bitter. He doesn't change his mind. He doubles down, consequences be damned. Then we make the consequences too big to ignore. Now she looked at him. How? The council. If we bring this to open session with evidence of what's happening up here, Roderick can't just dismiss it. The other nobles will demand action. The other nobles don't care about northern peasants. No, but they care about rebellion, about instability. Kyle moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers. We frame it right. Show them that fixing this is cheaper than fighting it. They'll pressure Roderick to act. And if that doesn't work, then we go to plan B, which is, I'm still working on it. He smiled, tired and honest. But it'll involve you being brilliant and me being reckless, our specialties. Alara wanted to laugh, wanted to lean into him and forget everything except this moment. But Thorn's warning echoed in her head, and she'd already pushed her luck far enough today. We should get back. Early start tomorrow. Alara, shh, don't. She cut him off gently. Please, I can't. If you say whatever you're about to say, I won't be strong enough to walk away. Kale's jaw worked. Okay. She left him standing on the wall and retreated to her tent, where she lay awake until dawn, wondering how long she could keep denying what they both knew was inevitable. The return journey started badly and got worse. They left the northern valley with promises secured and hope, fragile but real. 2 days into the ride home, they found the first body. A northern scout, throat cut, left displayed on the road like a warning. Thorn examined the corpse with professional detachment. Fresh, maybe 6 hours old. Who would... Alara started, then stopped as understanding hit. Roderick, Your Grace, my husband knows we succeeded. Someone's been reporting back. She looked at Kyle, saw her own fury reflected in his eyes. He's sending a message that peace doesn't serve him. That's insane, Garrett, the young guard from before. The king wouldn't sabotage his own queen's mission. Wouldn't he? Kale's voice cut like glass. Think about it. If the queen brokers peace, she proves herself valuable, proves the king wrong about dismissing her advice. Can't have that. Thorn said nothing, but his expression confirmed what they all feared. Roderick was willing to let the north burn if it meant keeping Alara in her place. They found 3 more bodies before nightfall. Northern messengers, all killed the same way, professional, quick, meant to provoke retaliation. By the time they made camp, Alara's hands were shaking with rage. He's going to start the war himself. She paced her tent while Kyle watched. Kill enough northerners, make them think I betrayed them, and they'll march south. Then Roderick gets his glorious military campaign, and I'm proven wrong. We can still stop this. How? We're 3 days from the capital. By the time we arrive, convince the council, send messages north, it'll be too late. She stopped pacing, met his eyes. Unless we split up. Absolutely not. Kale, listen. No, you're not riding ahead alone through territory where someone's actively trying to sabotage us. His voice went hard. That's suicide. So is letting Roderick start a war that kills thousands. She grabbed his arms. I can ride fast, reach the capital in 2 days instead of 3. Get to the council before he moves troops. And what about the assassins? The ones who hit us before? I'll take Garrett and 2 others. Small group, fast horses. Alara. This is my choice. My mission. She held his gaze. You taught me that what I want matters. Well, I want to save those people, even if it means risking myself.
The war played out across his face, every instinct screaming to keep her safe, fighting against his respect for her agency. Finally, if you do this, I'm coming with you. The main group needs, fuck the main group. You ride ahead, I ride with you. No room for argument. Non-negotiable. Part of her wanted to protest. Most of her was desperately grateful not to face this alone. Fine, we leave before dawn. Telling Thorn was harder. The captain listened to her plan, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your Grace, this is exactly the kind of reckless move your husband is betting you'll make. I know. If he has people waiting, and he will, you're riding straight into a trap. I know. And you're going anyway. I don't have a choice, Captain. Those northern lords trusted me. I gave my word. If Roderick's sabotaging peace, I have to stop him before it's too late. Thorn sighed. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most stubborn. Can't I be both? Despite everything, he smiled. Take Garrett and Marcus. They're good in a fight, and Master Arden, since I know you've already decided that. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet. You've still got to survive the next 2 days. He paused. Your Grace, if you make it to the capital, if you confront the king, he's not going to forgive this. You know that? I stopped caring about his forgiveness a long time ago. I'm not talking about forgiveness. I'm talking about consequences. Thorn's voice dropped. You're challenging him directly, in front of his council. That's not something Roderick will let slide, wife or not. Elara thought about the cold way her husband touched her, the clinical efficiency of their intimate moments, the years of being invisible. Good. Maybe it's time he actually saw me. They rode out 2 hours before dawn, 4 horses moving fast through darkness, pushing hard while the main group slept. By the time Thorn's unit woke, they'd have a 6-hour lead. Garrett and Marcus rode ahead, scouting. Kale stayed beside Elara, both of them focused on speed over conversation. But as the sun rose and the road opened up, he finally spoke. When we get to the capital, Roderick's gonna know. Know what? About us. Maybe not details, but enough. He kept his eyes forward. The way I've been acting, the way I fight for you, he's not stupid. I know. And he'll use it against you, against both of us. I know that too. Elara. He finally looked at her. I need you to understand. Whatever happens, whatever he does, I don't regret any of this. Meeting you, pushing you to speak up, falling in. He stopped. I don't regret it. She should tell him to stop, should maintain the distance, should protect them both from what was coming. Instead, she said, neither do I. They rode in silence after that, but something had shifted. Some invisible line crossed that they both knew meant no going back. The attack came at noon. They'd just entered a narrow canyon, high walls, limited sight lines, the perfect ambush point. Elara saw Marcus go down first, arrow through his throat before he could scream. Then Garrett, cut off by riders pouring from behind rocks. Go, Kael yelled, his sword already out. Elara, ride! She hesitated one fatal second, torn between survival and leaving him. And that's when rough hands yanked her from the saddle. She hit the ground hard, tasted blood, scrambled for her knife. Someone kicked it away. Someone else grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back. Got her! Kael roared, actually roared, and cut through 2 men like they were paper. But there were too many, and they knew what they were doing. They had him down in seconds, blade at his throat, and the man holding Elara, she couldn't see his face but recognized the professional calm, pressed cold steel against her neck. Easy strategist, you move, she dies. Kael froze, eyes locked on Elara, absolute murder in his gaze. The lead attacker dismounted, walked over to where Elara knelt with a knife at her throat. He was older, scarred, and moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. Your Grace? His voice was almost respectful. The king sends his regards. Elara's stomach dropped. Roderick sent you. Gave very specific instructions, actually. You're to return to the capital immediately. Under guard. For your own protection, of course. He smiled. Can't have the queen running around the wilderness getting ideas above her station. You son of a... The knife pressed harder. She felt blood trickle down her neck. Careful, Your Grace. His Majesty wants you alive. Didn't say anything about undamaged. Kael made a sound like a wounded animal. The men holding him tightened their grip, and Alara saw him calculate the odds of fighting free, saw him realize it was hopeless. "Don't," she forced the word out. "Kael, don't. Listen to your queen, Master Arden." The lead attacker turned to him. "You, on the other hand, His Majesty was less specific about your fate. Something about making an example. Let her go." Kael's voice was pure gravel. "This is between me and the king. Let her go, and I'll come quietly." "Kael, no. It's not up to you, strategist, or her grace." The attacker gestured. "Bind them both. We ride for the capital." They were hauled upright, wrists tied, and thrown across horses like cargo. Alara tried to catch Kael's eyes, but couldn't crane around far enough. All she could see was road disappearing beneath them as they rode south, toward Valthera, toward Roderick, and whatever hell he'd prepared. She'd gambled everything on being fast enough, smart enough, brave enough. She'd lost, and now they were both going to pay the price. The ride to the capital took 18 hours straight, brutal, exhausting, designed to break them before they even reached the palace. Alara lost feeling in her hands after hour 6. By hour 12, she'd stopped trying to struggle. By 18, she barely registered when they finally stopped. The palace courtyard, middle of the night, torches blazing, and Roderick standing at the top of the palace steps like a king from nightmares, cold and perfect and absolutely furious. They dragged Alara off the horse. She collapsed, legs numb, and strong hands hauled her upright. Beside her, Kael was shoved to his knees. "Your Majesty." The lead attacker bowed. "As ordered." Roderick descended the steps with measured precision. He looked at Alara first, scanned her from head to toe like cataloging damage, then shifted his gaze to Kael. "Master Arden, I believe you were assigned to protect my wife, not seduce her." "I haven't—" Kael started. "Don't." Roderick's voice could have frozen fire. "I have reports from 6 different sources about your behavior. The way you look at her, the way you fight for her, the way you touched her in the Northern Valley when you thought no one was watching." Alara's heart stopped. "Roderick, you will address me as your Majesty, and you will be silent." He finally looked at her fully, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was cold, calculating satisfaction. "Did you really think you could humiliate me, Alara? Challenge my authority? Undermine my policies? Run off into the wilderness with your lover? And I'd just let it happen?" "He's not," I said. "Silent." Roderick gestured, and someone struck Alara across the face hard enough to snap her head sideways. Kael lunged. It took 4 men to hold him back, and even then, he nearly broke free until someone kicked his ribs hard enough to drop him gasping. "Stop!" Alara tasted blood. "Stop, please. Roderick, he hasn't done anything." "He's made you forget your place. That's crime enough." Roderick turned to the guards. "Take Master Arden to the cells, treason charge, execution at dawn." "No!" Alara threw herself forward, got maybe 2 steps before hands yanked her back. "No, please. Your Majesty, please. He's innocent." "He's in love with my wife. That's all the guilt I need." They dragged Kael away. He fought every step, eyes locked on Alara, and she saw the moment he realized this was it. This was how it ended. "Alara!" His voice cracked. "Whatever happens." They hit him, dragged him through the courtyard doors, and he was gone, and Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process that in 8 hours Kael would die because of her. "Now!" Roderick's hand gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You and I are going to have a conversation about loyalty, about obedience, about what happens when queens forget who owns them." She wanted to spit in his face, wanted to scream that she'd never been his, would never be his, that he could kill her and she'd still choose Kael over him every single time. But if she had any chance of saving Kael's life, she needed to play this smart. So she met her husband's cold eyes and said the only thing that might work, "I'll do anything. Please, just don't kill him." Roderick smiled, and Alara knew with absolute certainty that she'd just made a deal. Roderick's smile was the most terrifying thing Alara had ever seen. Not because it was cruel, though cruelty lived in every line of it, but because it was satisfied, victorious, the smile of a man who'd laid a trap and watched his prey walk straight into it exactly as planned. "Anything." He repeated the word like tasting wine.
You'll do anything to save your lover's life. He's not. Don't insult me further with lies. Roderick released her chin, stepped back, adjusting his sleeves with meticulous care. I've had reports since the day he arrived. Every conversation, every look, every moment you thought was private, he paused, including the night he came to your chambers. The world tilted sideways. You knew. Of course I knew. Did you think I don't have eyes in every corner of this palace? Roderick's voice stayed conversational, like discussing the weather. I knew when he touched you, when you kissed him, when you let him fuck you in the bed I paid for. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Then why let it continue? Why give you freedom to ride north with him? Roderick circled her like a predator. Because I needed you to prove exactly what you are, Alara, a faithless whore who breaks her vows the moment someone shows her the slightest attention. The slap came from nowhere. Not his hand, just his words, each one a blade. Now everyone will know. He gestured to the courtyard. My guards, the servants. By morning, the entire court will hear how the queen committed treason with a common strategist, how she betrayed her king, her vows, her crown. He stopped in front of her, and no one will question what I do to punish it. Horror crashed through Alara's chest. You planned this, all of it. Not all. I couldn't have predicted you'd be stupid enough to actually fall in love with him. Roderick's expression didn't shift. That was a gift. Made it so much easier to destroy you both. The Northern mission was bait. Yes, he said it like admitting to a particularly clever chess move. I knew you'd succeed. You're competent despite being a woman. I also knew succeeding would make you arrogant, make you think you mattered. His eyes glittered. So I had my men kill a few Northern scouts, make it look like sabotage. Knew you'd panic. Knew you'd split from your escort, and knew your lover would follow. Every word was a hammer blow. The ambush wasn't meant to stop you, Alara. It was meant to catch you together. Give me all the proof I need to execute a traitor and imprison an unfaithful wife. Roderick leaned close, his breath cold on her face. You walked into this trap because you couldn't stop yourself from caring. That's always been your weakness. Alara's mind raced, trying to find angles, trying to see a way out. The Northern Lords, they'll march if you break the truce. Let them. I have 20,000 soldiers ready to crush them. He smiled again. In fact, their rebellion gives me exactly what I wanted, an excuse to annex the Northern Territories completely, remove their autonomy, install governors who actually obey. You'll kill thousands. I'll secure my kingdom, and everyone will see what happens when regions think they can negotiate with my wife instead of obeying their king. He straightened. You've been very useful, Alara. Helped me identify disloyal houses, prove that diplomacy is weakness, and give me grounds to eliminate a strategist who was getting too influential. He paused. I should thank you. She wanted to claw his eyes out, wanted to scream, wanted to hurt him the way he'd hurt her. But Kael was in the cells facing execution, and rage wouldn't save him. What do you want? Her voice came out dead. You said anything. What do you want from me? Roderick considered. Public confession. Tomorrow morning, before the court. You'll admit to adultery, treason, and conspiracy. You'll beg my forgiveness and accept whatever punishment I decree. And Kael dies regardless. He touched what's mine. That's not forgivable. Then I have nothing to confess to. Alara met his eyes. Kill me too. Execute us both. But I won't give you the satisfaction of humiliating me first. Something flickered in Roderick's expression. Surprise, maybe. He wasn't used to her defiance. You're willing to die for him. I'm willing to die rather than kneel to you again. They stared at each other. Years of marriage, years of control and subjugation and slow suffocation, all crystallizing into this single moment of absolute refusal. Then Roderick laughed, genuine amusement that was somehow worse than his anger. You really do love him. How pathetic. He turned to the guards. Take her to her chambers. Lock her in. No visitors, no servants. She stays there until she's ready to cooperate. I won't. You will. Because every hour you refuse, Master Arden suffers in the cells. No food, no water. And my interrogators are very creative about extracting confessions. Roderick's smile returned. You'll confess, Alara, to save him from pain, if nothing else. It's what soft hearts do.
They dragged her away before she could respond. The walk to her chambers was endless. Guards on either side, their grips bruising, while servants scattered at their approach. News was already spreading. She could see it in their eyes, the whispers starting before she'd even passed. The queen caught with a lover. The queen who committed treason. Her reputation was ashes before she reached her rooms. They threw her inside and locked the door from the outside. Alara heard the bar drop, the guards taking position, and then silence. She stood frozen for a long moment, mind spinning through everything Roderick had revealed. He'd known. From the beginning, he'd known. Every moment of freedom had been an illusion. Every choice she'd made had been anticipated, planned for, weaponized against her. And Kael was in the dungeons right now because she'd been too stupid to see the trap closing around them. Alara made it to the window before she started shaking. Not crying, she was beyond tears, just trembling with rage and horror and the absolute certainty that she'd destroyed everything. The northern peace, Kael's life, her own future, all of it burning because she dared to want something beyond survival. A sound at the door made her spin. Not the main entrance, the servants' entrance, the one that connected her chambers to the palace's hidden passages. It was opening. Alara grabbed the nearest weapon, a decorative letter opener, and faced whoever was coming through. Lady Meridian stepped into the room. "Put that down before you hurt yourself, Your Grace." Alara didn't lower the blade. "Get out." "In a moment. First, we talk." Meridian closed the door behind her, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. "You've made quite the mess, haven't you? If you're here to gloat, I'm here to offer you a choice." Meridian settled into a chair uninvited. "Though given your recent decision-making, I'm not confident you'll choose wisely." "What are you talking about?" "Your lover, the strategist." Meridian examined her nails. "The king plans to execute him at dawn. Public beheading, maximum humiliation. But there's a way to save him." Alara's heart stopped. "How?" "Confess everything Roderick wants. Publicly debase yourself. Accept his punishment, probably annulment and exile, and disappear quietly." Meridian looked up. "Do that, and I can arrange for Master Arden's sentence to be commuted. He'll be stripped of rank and exiled as well, but he'll live." "Why would you help?" "Because watching Roderick execute people for loving the wrong person is tedious, and I'm tired of it." Meridian's expression hardened. "Also because you're not the first woman he's destroyed this way. You're just the first one stupid enough to get caught." The words hung in the air like poison. "What? Did you think you were special, Your Grace? That you were the only wife Roderick neglected and humiliated?" Meridian's laugh was bitter. "He's been doing this for years. To you, to his mistresses, to anyone who thinks they matter more than his control." Alara's world was fracturing. "Mistresses?" "3 that I know of, all discarded when they started expecting actual affection." Meridian stood, moved to the window. "Your crime wasn't adultery, Your Grace. It was daring to find happiness he didn't give you. That's what he can't forgive." "Then why the elaborate trap? Why not just divorce me?" "Because divorce is weak. Divorce admits failure." Meridian turned. "But a wife who betrays him? A wife he punishes publicly? That's power. That's control. That sends a message to every woman in this kingdom about what happens when you forget your place." Alara felt sick. "You're saying he wanted me to betray him. I'm saying he created the perfect conditions for it, then watched you fall apart exactly as planned." Meridian's voice softened slightly. "The North mission was brilliant, I'll give him that. Give you real power, real purpose, just long enough to make you believe you could be more than his property, then snatch it away and prove you never were." Every word was true. Alara could see it now, the pattern, the manipulation, the slow, deliberate destruction of everything she'd built. And Kael? Collateral damage, or possibly a bonus. Roderick did mention the man was getting too popular with the court, too willing to challenge authority. Meridian paused. "Either way, he's dead unless you confess." "You said you could save him." "I said I could arrange commutation, if you give Roderick what he wants." Meridian met her eyes. "So here's your choice, Your Grace. Destroy yourself to save your lover, or refuse and watch him die knowing you could have prevented it." It wasn't a choice. It was torture dressed as mercy. Alara sank into a chair, every muscle suddenly too heavy to hold her upright. Why are you really helping? Because I'm next. Meridian's voice went flat. Or I would be, if I showed weakness. Roderick's already watching me, waiting for me to step wrong. And I'm tired of living in fear of a man who sees people as game pieces. Then help me fight him. With what? You have no allies, no power, no leverage. You're locked in this room until you break. Meridian moved toward the door. I can save the man you love. That's all I can offer. Take it or don't. Wait, Alara stood. If I confess, if I do everything Roderick wants, he'll let Kael live. He'll commute the execution, exile instead. Master Arden will have to leave Valthera, never return, but he'll breathe. Meridian paused with her hand on the doorknob. It's more mercy than most get. And me? Annulment, exile. You'll be nobody, Your Grace. Stripped of title, wealth, protection, you'll spend the rest of your life as a disgraced former queen hiding in whatever kingdom will take you. Meridian's expression held something like pity. But you'll know he's alive. That has to count for something. She left before Alara could respond. The silence after was suffocating. Alara stood alone in chambers that had been her prison for 3 years, weighing futures that all ended in destruction. Confess. And she saved Kael, but destroyed herself. Gave Roderick everything he wanted and proved every awful thing he'd said about her being weak. Refuse. And Kael died screaming while she listened from locked rooms, knowing she could have stopped it. No good options, no clever third path, just 2 kinds of hell, and she had to choose. The hours crawled past. Alara watched the sun set and rise again through her window, each minute an agony of indecision. At some point near midnight, she heard sounds from the cells below, screaming, male screaming, raw and broken. Kael. They were hurting him. Roderick's interrogators extracting their confession or just enjoying the cruelty, and Alara pressed her hands over her ears but couldn't block it out. This was her fault, all of it. She'd known the risks and taken them anyway, and now Kael was paying the price. Dawn came too fast. The door opened. Guards entered, along with Meridian and a woman Alara didn't recognize carrying parchment and ink. Your Grace. Meridian's voice was professionally neutral. The king requires your decision. Will you confess? Alara looked at the parchment, looked at Meridian's carefully blank expression, thought about Kael in the cells, broken and bleeding because of her. If I sign, you swear he lives? I swear, exiled but breathing. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all she had. Alara took the quill. The confession was brutal. She read it through once, bile rising with every word. Adultery, treason, conspiracy to undermine the king's authority. It painted her as exactly what Roderick wanted, a faithless whore who'd betrayed everything for lust. None of it was true. All of it would become truth the moment she signed. There's one addition. Meridian pointed to a clause near the end. You'll state that Master Arden seduced you, that he took advantage of your loneliness and manipulated you into betraying your vows. Alara's hand froze. No. Your Grace, no. I won't let Kael take blame for my choices. She met Meridian's eyes. Change it. Say I pursued him. Say I was the seducer, but I won't destroy his name to save his life. The king won't accept. Then the king can watch me refuse to sign and execute us both. Alara's voice went hard. I'm done protecting Roderick's ego at other people's expense. Change it or I walk. Meridian stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, small but genuine. All right, I'll revise. She took the parchment. Give me an hour. They left Alara alone again. When Meridian returned, the confession had been altered. Now it stated that Alara had pursued Kael, that she'd used her position to seduce him, that he'd tried to resist, but she'd worn him down. It was still a lie, but at least it was a lie that spared Kael the worst of the blame. Alara signed. Her hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible, but it was done. Legal, binding. She'd just confessed to treason and adultery in writing. Good. Meridian took the document. The king wants you in the throne room in 1 hour. Public reading of the confession, then sentencing. And Kael? Will be brought up after you confess. Exile proclamation will be read simultaneously. Meridian paused.
Your Grace, I'm sorry. For what it's worth. It's worth nothing. Alara's voice was hollow. But thank you anyway. The throne room was packed. Every noble in the capital had been summoned for this. The public humiliation of Queen Alara Vance. They lined the walls, filled the galleries, craned for better views of the spectacle. Alara walked the length of the hall with her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She wore the dress Roderick's servants had brought, plain gray, no jewels, no crown. The clothes of a woman being stripped of everything. Roderick sat on his throne looking like justice incarnate. Cold. Perfect. Utterly in control. Alara stopped at the required distance and didn't bow. Your Majesty, her voice carried across the silent hall. I'm told you require my presence. I require your confession, Roderick gestured, and a court official stepped forward with her signed document. You will read it aloud, every word, so the court understands the depth of your betrayal. This was it, the final humiliation, her last chance to refuse, to damn the consequences and go down fighting. But then the side door opened and they brought Kael in. He looked like hell, bruised, bloodied, barely able to stand without the guards supporting him. But his eyes found hers across the throne room, and what she saw there wasn't defeat. It was forgiveness. He knew. Somehow he knew what she was about to do, and he didn't blame her for it. That made it worse. Alara took the parchment with shaking hands. I, Alara Vance, Queen of Althera, do hereby confess, louder. Roderick's command cracked like a whip. So everyone can hear. She started again, forcing her voice to carry. Each word was agony, each sentence a blade. She confessed to adultery, to pursuing Kyle despite her vows, to betraying her king and her crown. The court watched in horrified silence. When she finished, Roderick stood. You have heard the queen's confession, witnessed her betrayal in her own words. Now hear her punishment. This was it. Annulment and exile, stripping of title and wealth, everything Meridian had promised. For the crime of adultery and treason, I hereby declare this marriage void. Alara Vance is no longer queen, no longer my wife, and no longer welcome in Valthera. Roderick's voice was pure ice. She will be exiled immediately. All titles, properties, and rights are forfeit. She leaves with nothing but the clothes she wears. Alara nodded. She'd expected this. Prepared for it. As for her co-conspirator, Roderick gestured to Kael. Master Kael Arden, who allowed himself to be seduced by a faithless woman, who betrayed the trust placed in him. Your Majesty, Alara interrupted, knowing it was dangerous but unable to stop. You promised exile, not execution. I promised nothing. Roderick's smile returned. Lady Meridian made promises. I simply allowed her to comfort you with lies. The world stopped. What? Did you really think I'd let the man who fucked my wife simply walk away? That I'd show mercy to someone who touched what belongs to me? Roderick descended from the throne, each step deliberate. No, Alara. Master Arden dies. Today. Now. And you get to watch. Alara couldn't breathe. You said... Meridian said what I told her to say. One last test of your pathetic nature. He stopped in front of her. And you failed spectacularly. Threw away your dignity, your name, everything, for a false promise. He leaned close. You really are as stupid as I always thought. Horror crashed through her chest. No, you can't. Guards, take Master Arden to the courtyard. Prepare the block. They dragged Kael toward the doors. He didn't fight, didn't struggle, just kept his eyes locked on Alara as they pulled him away. I love you. His voice carried across the throne room. Whatever happens, I love you. Then he was gone. Alara stood frozen, mind fracturing, unable to process that she'd just destroyed herself for nothing, that Roderick had played her perfectly, given her false hope just to snatch it away and prove how completely he owned her. Please. She fell to her knees, pride shattered, begging now because what else was left? Please, Your Majesty, I'll do anything, truly anything. Just don't kill him. You have nothing left to bargain with. Roderick looked down at her with absolute contempt. You gave me your confession, your dignity, your pathetic attempt at love, and I took all of it. He turned away.
Guards, escort the former queen to the courtyard. She'll watch the execution before her exile begins. They hauled her upright. Alara fought this time, screaming, clawing, trying to break free, but there were too many, and she was one woman against Roderick's entire guard. They dragged her to the courtyard where a block waited, executioner standing ready with his axe gleaming in morning sun. Kael was already there, forced to his knees, head positioned. "No!" Alara thrashed harder. "No, please, Roderick, please!" The king appeared beside her, watching with clinical interest. "This is what happens when you forget your place, Alara, when you dare to want more than I give you." His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you did this, your weakness, your choices. You killed him." The executioner raised his axe. Alara screamed Kael's name, and then, "Stop!" The voice came from the palace entrance. Not shouted, but it carried absolute authority. Everyone froze. The executioner lowered his axe. Guards turned. Lord Cassian stepped into the courtyard, and he wasn't alone. Behind him marched at least 50 armed men, not palace guards, but soldiers in northern colors. And beside Cassian walked Lord Garrett Frost. Roderick's expression finally cracked, showing something like uncertainty. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning, your majesty, is that you've made a grave miscalculation." Cassian's voice was colder than Alara had ever heard it. "Lord Frost, if you would." Frost stepped forward, holding a document with official seals. "King Roderick Hale, I am here as representative of the Northern Coalition. We have evidence of your sabotage of the Queen's peace mission, evidence of your deliberate provocation of war, and evidence—" he looked at Alara, something like respect in his eyes, "that everything you've accused Her Grace of is a fabrication designed to cover your own crimes." The courtyard erupted. Roderick's face went white, then red. "This is treason. This is justice." Cassian moved to stand beside Kael, one hand on his shoulder. "Master Arden managed to send word before your men captured him. Told us everything, the setup, the trap, your plan to execute him and exile the queen." He paused. "Did you really think we'd stand by and let you murder one of the best strategists in 3 kingdoms? He's a traitor. He's a loyal servant who dared to challenge your tyranny. There's a difference." Cassian gestured, and his men moved to surround the execution block. "Stand down, executioner. This man is under our protection now." For a long moment, Roderick just stood there, calculation visible behind his eyes. He was outnumbered in his own courtyard, caught in a trap he hadn't anticipated. Then he smiled, that cold, terrible smile, and Alara's stomach dropped because she knew that expression. He had one more move. "Very well, you want him?" Roderick gestured at Kael. "Take him, and the former queen as well. But understand this, Lord Cassian, the moment they leave this palace under your protection, Valthera and your coalition are at war. Officially. Irrevocably." Silence fell like a hammer. "You'd start a war over this, son?" Cassian's voice held disbelief. "I'd start a war to prove that no one, not northern lords, not scheming advisors, not faithless wives, defies me without consequences." Roderick's gaze swept the courtyard. "So choose. Walk away with them and watch thousands die in the conflict, or leave them to their fates and maintain peace." It was brilliant, vicious. Roderick was betting that Cassian valued stability more than 2 lives. Alara saw the war play out across Cassian's face, saw him weigh the odds, calculate the cost. "Don't!" She forced the word out. "Lord Cassian, don't start a war for us, please." "Your Grace." "He's right. Thousands will die. The North will burn." She looked at Kael, memorized his face because this might be the last time. "Let him execute us. It's not worth the bloodshed." "Alara, no." Kael struggled against his guards. "Don't you dare." "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry for all of this, but I won't let more people die because of my mistakes." Frost stepped forward, expression grim. "Your Grace, you brokered peace for us, risked everything. We're not abandoning you now." "Then you're condemning your people to war they can't win." Alara met his eyes. "Lord Frost, I'm asking, begging, walk away. Save your territories. Don't let Roderick use my execution as an excuse to destroy everything we built." The silence stretched. Then Cassian quietly, "Your Majesty, If we leave them. You give your word this ends? No retaliation against the North? Roderick considered. The North withdraws all forces, accepts new governance terms, and acknowledges that this entire incident was the result of a treasonous queen and her seducer working to undermine the crown. He paused. Agree to those terms, and there's no war. That's, Frost started. Acceptable. Alara cut him off. Those terms are acceptable. Lord Frost, agree. Please. She watched understanding dawn in the Northern Lord's eyes, saw him realize what she was doing, sacrificing herself and Kael to give the North a chance at survival, letting Roderick win completely to save thousands of lives. Your Grace, Frost's voice was thick. Agree. Now, before he changes his mind. Frost looked at Cassian. Some silent communication passed between them. Then both men stepped back, hands away from weapons. We agree, Cassian said. On condition that Master Arden and the former queen are given quick deaths. No torture. Done, Roderick waved dismissively. Now leave my palace before I charge you with conspiracy as well. They left. All of them. Cassian, Frost, the Northern soldiers. Walking away because the alternative was war, and Alara had begged them to choose peace over her life. The courtyard emptied until it was just Roderick, his guards, Alara, and Kael. Well, the king's voice carried satisfaction. That was entertaining, though I'm disappointed Lord Cassian folded so easily. You got what you wanted, Alara's voice was hollow. We're dead. The North is broken. You win. I always win, Alara. That's what you never understood. He gestured to the executioner. Master Arden first. Make it clean. I did promise. They forced Kael back to his knees. He didn't fight this time, just looked at Alara with eyes full of everything they'd never get to say. I don't regret any of it, he said. Meeting you, loving you, all of it, worth it. Alara couldn't speak past the grief choking her. The executioner raised his axe. And Alara made a choice. She lunged, not at the executioner, not at Roderick, but at the nearest guard, grabbed his sword from its sheath with strength born of desperation, and threw herself between Kael and the falling blade. Alara! Kael's scream. The axe came down, but instead of Kael's neck, it caught the sword she'd raised in both hands. The impact drove her to her knees, arms screaming, but the blade held. For one frozen second, everyone stared. Then Alara twisted, using the axe as leverage to yank the executioner off balance. He stumbled. She kicked his knee, heard it crack, and he went down. She spun to face Roderick with a stolen sword and nothing left to lose. No. Her voice came out feral. No, you don't get to kill him. Not today. Not while I'm breathing. Roderick's expression shifted through surprise to fury. Guards! Restrain her! They came at her from three sides. Alara had never been trained in combat, had no idea how to properly hold a sword, but rage made her dangerous, and desperation made her fast. She cut the first guard across the arm, dodged the second, kicked the third in the groin and heard him drop gasping. More guards poured into the courtyard. Alara! Kael was fighting his restraints, eyes wild. Run! Forget me and run! She couldn't run. Wouldn't leave him. A blade caught her shoulder, not deep, but enough to make her stagger. Another sliced her thigh. Blood poured hot down her leg, and she knew this was it. She was going to die here. But she'd die fighting instead of kneeling, and that counted for something. Alara raised her stolen sword one more time, vision blurring, facing down 20 armed men with nothing but stubborn refusal to quit. Roderick watched from his safe distance, and for the first time in their entire marriage, she saw something like respect in his eyes. Enough! His voice cut through the chaos. Stand down! The guards hesitated, then obeyed. Alara swayed, bleeding, barely standing. What? I said enough. Roderick approached slowly, studying her like a particularly interesting specimen. 3 years I've known you, Alara. 3 years of watching you play the obedient wife. And only now, faced with death, do you finally show your teeth. She didn't lower the sword. If you're going to kill us, get it over with. Oh, I'm not going to kill you. His smile returned, colder than ever. I'm going to offer you a choice. A real one this time. I don't want your... Master Arden lives. Full pardon. Freedom to leave Valthera and never return. Roderick circled her like a predator.
But you stay, as my wife, as my queen, and you never speak of this again. The world tilted. What? You heard me. He goes free. You stay imprisoned in this marriage forever. Roderick stopped in front of her. Or refuse, and I execute him right now while you watch. Your choice. It was the cruelest thing he could have devised.
Let Kale live but lose him forever. Or doom him to die and carry that guilt eternally. Alara looked at Kyle, saw the horror dawning in his eyes as he understood the trap. Don't, he said. Alara, don't you dare. Do we have a deal? Roderick extended his hand, and Alara, bleeding and broken and staring at the only man who'd ever truly seen her, made the choice that would destroy. Alara stared at Roderick's outstretched hand like it was a serpent. Behind her, Kyle was screaming. Actually screaming, his voice raw and broken in a way she'd never heard before. Don't do it! Alara, don't you fucking dare! But she was already reaching out. Her fingers were an inch from Roderick's when the courtyard exploded. The palace wall to the east erupted in a shower of stone and mortar. Through the dust and debris rode Lord Garrett Frost at the head of 200 mounted warriors, their war cries shaking the morning air. Hold! Frost's voice boomed across the chaos. Nobody moves or the king dies! Alara spun. Behind Roderick, 3 northern archers had materialized on the palace roof, arrows trained directly on the king's chest. Close-range shots. Impossible to miss. Roderick froze, his hand still extended, calculation racing behind his eyes. Lord Frost. His voice stayed eerily calm. This is foolish even for you. Foolish was letting you play us like children. Frost dismounted, sword drawn, moving through scattered guards who were too stunned to react. Cassian suspected your endgame the moment you offered terms. So we circled back, quiet-like. Good thing, too. Looks like Her Grace was about to make a choice that would have destroyed her. This is treason. This is justice, you sadistic bastard. Frost stopped 10 feet away, blade pointed at Roderick's throat. Your Majesty, you're going to give the order. Full pardon for Master Arden and the Queen, right now, or those archers put 3 arrows through your spine. The courtyard held its breath. Roderick's guards had their hands on weapons but couldn't draw, not with their king in the crosshairs. The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Then Roderick laughed. Actually laughed, the sound cold and genuinely amused. You think killing me solves anything? The succession is already established. Duke Merrick takes the throne, and Merrick hates the North even more than I do. His smile was poisonous. Shoot me, and you guarantee the war you're trying to prevent, except now it's against a king who has no personal stake in the Queen's survival. Frost's expression flickered. He hadn't considered succession. Alara saw the trap reforming, saw Roderick maneuvering even with arrows aimed at his heart, and something inside her snapped completely. Then we don't kill you. Her voice cut through the tension. We destroy you instead. Every eye turned to her. She stood there bleeding from 6 wounds, still gripping a stolen sword, and met her husband's gaze without flinching. You want control? Want everyone to fear you? Want to prove queens and strategists and northern lords are beneath you? She took a step forward. Then face me, one-on-one, right here. No guards, no tricks, no hiding behind your crown. Roderick's smile widened. You're challenging me to single combat? You, who've never held a sword before today? I'm challenging you to prove you're half the king you pretend to be. Alara raised her blade. Unless you're afraid to fight someone who might actually hit back. The insult landed like a physical blow. She saw rage flash in Roderick's eyes, real rage, not the cold control he usually maintained. Alara, no! Kale struggled harder against his restraints. He'll kill you. Maybe. But at least I'll die standing instead of kneeling. She never looked away from Roderick. What's it going to be, Your Majesty? Show everyone you're strong enough to best your own wife? Or admit you only win when the fight's rigged? Silence crashed across the courtyard. Roderick's jaw worked. He was actually considering it. She could see the calculation, the anger warring with strategy. Refusing would look weak. But accepting meant risking humiliation if she somehow landed a blow. Fine. He stripped off his ceremonial cloak, drew his sword with practiced ease. Lord Frost, call off your archers. This is between me and my faithless wife. Your Grace, Frost started. Do it! Alara's voice carried absolute certainty. This ends now, one way or another. Frost hesitated, then signaled. The archers lowered their bows but stayed positioned. The guards pulled back, forming a wide circle. Someone cut Kael's restraints, and he lunged toward Alara, but Frost's men caught him. Let me go! She doesn't know how to... She knows enough to be brave. Frost's voice was grim. More than most. Alara and Roderick faced each other across 20 feet of blood-stained courtyard stone. Any last words? Roderick asked. Before I end this charade, just one question. Alara adjusted her grip, remembering the stance she'd seen guards practice. Did you ever love me? Even a little? Something flickered in his expression, too fast to read. No, you were a means to an end, a womb to carry heirs and a face to charm foreign dignitaries. He settled into a fighting stance that spoke of years of training. That's all you ever were. Good. Alara smiled, and it felt feral. Makes this easier. He attacked first. The blade came fast, a testing strike aimed at her shoulder. Alara barely got her sword up in time, the impact jarring her arms to the bone. She stumbled back, already off balance. Roderick pressed the advantage. A flurry of strikes, high, low, feinting left, then cutting right. Each one driven by decades of practice against Alara's desperate improvisation. She blocked two. The third caught her ribs, slicing through fabric and skin. Pain exploded white-hot, and she gasped, retreating. You're already bleeding out. Roderick's voice stayed conversational as he stalked her. Surrender now, and I'll make it quick. Fuck you. She lunged, clumsy but committed. Her blade scraped along his, found no purchase, and he twisted his wrist in some complicated maneuver that sent her sword flying. It clattered across stone, 10 feet away. Alara dove for it. Roderick's boot caught her in the stomach, flipping her onto her back. Before she could move, his blade was at her throat. Pathetic. He stared down at her, absolute contempt in his eyes. Did you really think rage would overcome training? That wanting something badly enough would make you capable? Blood filled Alara's mouth. She'd bitten her tongue in the fall. I thought it was worth trying. It wasn't. Nothing you've ever done has been worth anything. He increased pressure, the blade biting skin. You failed as a wife, failed as a queen, and now you failed as a warrior. What's left, Alara? What purpose do you possibly serve? She couldn't answer. Could barely breathe with his sword cutting into her throat and her vision blurring from blood loss. This was it. She'd gambled everything on a stand she couldn't win, and now she was going to die in the dirt while Kael watched. Your Majesty. Kael's voice, hoarse and desperate. Please, let her go. I'll do anything, confess to anything. Just let her live. No. Roderick didn't look away from Alara. She made her choice. Now she pays for it. He raised his sword for the killing blow. Alara's hand found something in the dirt, a shard of broken stone from the exploded wall. Without thinking, operating on pure instinct, she grabbed it and drove it upward into Roderick's calf. He screamed. Actually screamed, the sound shocked and agonized, and his blade wavered. Alara rolled, ignoring the fire in her ribs, and kicked his injured leg. Roderick went down hard, and suddenly they were both on the ground, scrambling, bleeding, desperate. She reached her fallen sword first, spun, drove it through Roderick's shoulder, pinning him to the ground. He howled, trying to pull free, but she put her weight on the blade, leaning close until they were face to face. You asked what purpose I serve. Her voice came out in gasps. I serve me, not you, not the crown, not anyone's expectations. She twisted the blade slightly, and he gasped. I serve myself. You're insane. No, I'm done. She pulled the sword free, and Roderick clutched his bleeding shoulder. Done being invisible. Done being property. Done letting you decide my worth. She raised the blade. Every eye in the courtyard was locked on her. The guards, Frost's warriors, Kael with tears streaming down his face, all of them watching to see if she'd do it, if she'd actually kill the king. Alara met Roderick's eyes, saw fear there for the first time in 3 years, and lowered her sword. I'm not going to kill you. She stepped back, swaying, because you're not worth becoming a murderer, not worth the guilt, not worth another second of my life. She turned to face the assembled crowd. King Roderick Hale is guilty of treason against his own people, of deliberately sabotaging peace, of torturing prisoners and executing innocents, of using his crown to destroy anyone who dares challenge his control. Her voice carried across the silent courtyard. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to look, to see, to acknowledge what you've all known and ignored because it was easier than standing up. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then Lord Cassian pushed through the crowd, and he wasn't alone this time. Behind him walked Duke Merrick, Lady Fentress, Lord Harwin, and at least 20 other nobles. Your Grace, Cassian's voice held something like wonder. We've been gathering evidence for months, waiting for the right moment to move against the king's tyranny. He looked at Roderick bleeding on the ground. I think you just gave us that moment. Roderick tried to rise. You can't. I am your king. You were our king. Merrick's voice was cold. But kings serve their kingdoms. You've served only yourself. He gestured, and guards, palace guards, Roderick's own men, moved forward. King Roderick Hale, you are hereby stripped of your crown and charged with crimes against the realm. No! Roderick lunged, trying to grab his fallen sword. I am chosen. I am ordained. You cannot. They restrained him anyway, dragged him upright despite his struggles, his screaming, his demands. And Alara watched this man who'd controlled her for 3 years being hauled away in chains and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just emptiness where rage used to be. She swayed. The courtyard tilted. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you. Kale's voice in her ear, rough with emotion. I've got you. I've got you. You're okay. Did we? She couldn't focus. He's done. Finished. You ended him. Kyle was shaking, or maybe she was shaking, or maybe they both were. You magnificent, terrifying, absolutely insane woman. You ended him. Good. Her eyes were closing. Kyle, I need to. There's so much. Later. Right now you're bleeding everywhere and possibly dying. He lifted her like she weighed nothing. Someone get a physician. Now! Voices erupted around them, running footsteps, urgent orders. Alara let it all wash over her, focusing only on Kyle's heartbeat against her ear and the knowledge that he was alive. She was alive. They'd survived. Everything else could wait. She woke in unfamiliar rooms, not her chambers. Those had been stripped, she remembered vaguely. Guest quarters, maybe. Somewhere with clean sheets and actual sunlight streaming through windows. You're awake. Kale's voice. He sat beside the bed looking like he hadn't slept in days, dark circles under red-rimmed eyes. About time. You've been out for 18 hours. Alara tried to sit up. Pain screamed through her ribs, and she gasped. Don't move. His hands were gentle, easing her back down. You've got 6 stitched wounds, 2 cracked ribs, and the physician says you're lucky to be breathing. His voice cracked. You scared the hell out of me. Sorry. Sorry? He laughed, but it came out broken. You challenged a trained warrior to single combat with 0 experience. You could have died. You nearly did die. And you're sorry? Would you rather I knelt to him? I'd rather you hadn't had to make that choice at all. His hand found hers, gripped tight. But since you did, God, Alara, that was the bravest, stupidest thing I've ever seen. Runs in the family. She managed a weak smile. What happened after I passed out? Chaos. Good chaos. Kale shifted, still not letting go of her hand. The council moved fast. Duke Merrick's been appointed regent until they can sort out succession. Roderick's in the cells, the same ones he put me in. And the northern lords are negotiating peace terms that actually might stick this time. And us? Something complicated crossed his face. That's complicated. Alara's stomach clenched. How complicated? You're technically still queen. The marriage wasn't annulled because the king who declared it void is no longer recognized as legitimate. Kale's thumb traced circles on her palm. Which means legally, you could claim the throne, if you wanted. The thought made her want to laugh hysterically. I don't want the throne. I never wanted it. She met his eyes. I want to be free. Actually, free. Is that possible? The council's divided. Half think you're a hero who saved the kingdom.
Half think you're a dangerous woman who attacked her husband and destabilized the succession." He paused. "They're meeting tomorrow to decide your fate. And yours? Cleared of all charges. Officially recognized as having acted in defense of the realm." His smile was bitter. "Turns out being tortured in the king's dungeons buys you a lot of sympathy." "Kyle, I'm fine. Or I will be." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "But I need to know something. When this is over, when the council makes their decision, what do you want, really want?" Alara closed her eyes, feeling his breath against her skin, and let herself imagine it. A life beyond these walls. No crown, no title, no expectations, except the ones she set for herself. Maybe a small house in some quiet territory where nobody knew her face. A garden, simple work, and Kyle beside her every morning. It sounded like paradise. "I want to disappear." The words came out whisper soft. "Take whatever name isn't Vance or Hale. Go somewhere the court can't reach, and build something that's actually mine. With me. If you'll come." His kiss was answer enough. Gentle, because she was injured, but carrying all the desperate relief of two people who'd nearly lost everything. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I'd follow you anywhere. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to." A knock interrupted them. Lord Cassian entered without waiting for permission, looking exhausted but determined. His gaze swept over them, Kael still holding Alara's hand, both of them obviously closer than propriety allowed, and he sighed. "I'm not going to ask. Don't want to know." He pulled up a chair. "Your Grace, we need to talk about tomorrow's council session." "I'm abdicating," Alara said it before he could continue. "Whatever they decide, I'm giving up any claim to the throne. Let Merrick have it, or find some distant cousin. I don't care." Cassian's eyebrows rose. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. The Northern Lords want you to stay. They trust you in a way they'll never trust another Southern noble." His expression was carefully neutral. "You could actually change things, Your Grace. Fix the systems that broke under Roderick. Make the kingdom into something better." It was tempting. God, it was tempting. The chance to actually matter, to use power for good instead of decoration. But Alara had learned something in that courtyard with Roderick's blade at her throat. Power wasn't worth the cage it came in. "No." She squeezed Kyle's hand. "I've spent 3 years being what other people needed. Now I'm going to be what I need, and that's not a queen." Cassian studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuine and a little sad. "I understand, truly." He stood. "I'll inform the council. They won't like it, but they'll accept it." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Your Grace, you would have been remarkable." "I already am." Alara's voice was steady. "Just not here." He left them alone. Alara lay back, exhausted but lighter than she'd felt in years. Tomorrow the council would meet. Tomorrow decisions would be made about succession and stability and the kingdom's future. But tonight she was alive and free and loved by someone who saw her as a person instead of property. That was enough. More than enough. The council session was a circus. They held it in the throne room, ironic, considering the throne sat empty with Roderick imprisoned and no clear successor crowned. Nobles packed the galleries, everyone shouting opinions about what should happen to the queen who'd challenged her king and lived. Alara stood in the center of it all, wearing borrowed clothes and refusing to bow. Kyle stood beside her, close enough their shoulders touched, and she drew strength from his steady presence. Duke Merrick called for order. It took 10 minutes to achieve something resembling quiet. "This council is assembled to address several pressing matters." His voice carried the weight of temporary authority. "First, the matter of Queen Alara Vance." The room erupted again. Merrick let it rage for 30 seconds before slamming his staff against marble. "Silence!" The command actually worked. "The Queen has requested to address this council directly. I've granted permission. Your Grace, the floor is yours." Alara stepped forward. Every eye locked on her. Nobles who'd watched her be invisible for 3 years now, seeing her clearly for the first time. "I'm abdicating." No preamble, no apology. "Any claim I have to the throne through marriage to Roderick Hale, I hereby relinquish. Find another ruler. Someone who actually wants the responsibility." Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. "Your Grace!" Lord Harwin stood.
You cannot simply abandon the kingdom in crisis. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm choosing myself for once. She met his gaze steadily. This kingdom needs a leader who wants to lead. That's not me. It never was. The Northern Territories trust you. Lady Moraine's voice rang out. Trust your judgment, your integrity. Without you, the peace we've built crumbles. Then build it on something more stable than one person's reputation. Alara turned to face the Northern delegation. Lady Moraine, Lord Frost, you're brilliant leaders. You don't need me to validate your worth. Negotiate directly with whoever takes this throne. Demand the respect you've earned. But don't make me your symbol. Frost stood slowly. Your Grace, you saved our people. We owe you. You owe me nothing. We helped each other, that's all. She softened slightly. I'm grateful for everything you did, for risking war to save us. But I can't be your queen. I can barely be anyone's queen, including my own. The silence that fell was different now, thoughtful instead of shocked. Then Duke Merrick spoke. If the queen abdicates, and King Roderick is imprisoned awaiting trial, the succession falls to the next legitimate heir. He paused. That would be myself, as first cousin to the king. Murmurs of agreement. I accept the responsibility. Merrick's voice was measured. On condition that this council establishes checks on royal authority. What Roderick did, the torture, the manipulation, the abuse of power, it cannot be allowed again. Agreed. Cassian stood. I propose a formal charter, limiting royal prerogative, establishing council oversight, protecting citizens from tyrannical rule. The discussion exploded into policy debate. Constitutional structures, power balancing, safeguards against future abuse. Alara let it wash over her. This was important work, vital even. But it wasn't hers to do anymore. She caught Kael's eye, jerked her head toward the door. They slipped out while the nobles argued, walking through corridors that had been Alara's prison for 3 years and would never hold her again. Where are we going? Kael asked. Anywhere but here. They made it to the gardens before anyone noticed they'd left. The eastern terrace where Kael had first asked what she wanted, where this entire catastrophic, beautiful mess had started. So, Kael leaned against the wall. We're really doing this. Walking away from everything. You don't have to follow. Alara turned to face him. Cassian said you're a hero now. You could stay. Build a career, earn a title, become someone important. I don't want to be important. I want to be with you. He pulled her close, careful of her injuries, wherever that leads. It might lead nowhere. Small house, simple life, complete obscurity. Sounds perfect. She kissed him, pouring 3 years of starvation into it. 3 years of being invisible and silenced and owned, now finally over. When they broke apart, Kael was grinning. We should probably figure out the practical details. Where we're going, how we're surviving, what names we're using. Later, Alara cut him off. Right now, I just want to stand here and know I'm free. Fair enough. They stayed there until sunset painted the sky orange and gold. 2 people who'd survived hell planning a future that belonged to nobody but themselves. Behind them, the palace buzzed with council meetings and succession debates and the complicated work of rebuilding a broken kingdom. Let them rebuild. Alara had her own rebuilding to do. And for the first time in 3 years, she was actually looking forward to it. The council's final decision came 3 days later. Alara Vance would be granted full pardon for any alleged crimes, with official recognition of her service to the kingdom. Her marriage to Roderick Hale was declared void due to his criminal conviction. She was free to leave Valthera with no restrictions and a modest pension for her years as queen. It was more generous than she'd expected, less than she probably deserved, but it was enough. They left at dawn on the 5th day. No ceremony, no farewell audiences, just 2 horses and enough supplies for a long journey. Lord Frost had arranged safe passage through the Northern Territories, and Cassian had provided letters of introduction to allies in neighboring kingdoms. Alara wore traveling clothes and carried nothing from her old life except a small knife Kael had given her. They rode through the palace gates as the sun rose, and Alara didn't look back. Where to first? Kael asked. North. Visit Lord Frost's territories. Make sure the peace is holding. Alara adjusted her reins. Then, I don't know. Somewhere with mountains or ocean. Somewhere that doesn't know what a queen looks like. Somewhere you can just be Alara. Somewhere I can figure out who Alara actually is.
They rode in comfortable silence for an hour, the city falling away behind them, open road stretching ahead.
Then Kael spoke quietly. You know there's a chance this doesn't work, that we get wherever we're going and realize we barely know each other outside of crisis. I know. And you're okay with that risk? Alara thought about it, really thought, instead of just reacting. I spent 3 years in a marriage that was safe and suffocating, where I knew exactly what to expect and hated every minute. She looked at him. I'd rather risk failing with you than succeed at being someone else's possession. Kael's smile could have lit the entire kingdom. Good answer. I'm occasionally capable of those. Occasionally, you challenged a king to single combat and won. You're capable of pretty much anything. I got lucky and desperate. Still counts. He reached across the space between their horses, and she took his hand. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Deal? Deal. They rode north toward mountains and freedom and whatever future they could build from the ashes of everything they'd destroyed. Behind them, Valthera began the slow work of healing. Roderick stayed imprisoned, awaiting trial for crimes that would likely see him executed or exiled. Duke Merrick took the throne with a reformist council that actually listened to northern grievances. Peace held, fragile but real, built on foundations that went deeper than one person's courage. And in the palace chambers that had once belonged to Queen Alara Vance, new servants stripped away the gold and crystal and imported tapestries. Underneath, they found the rough paintings she'd tried to hang years ago, landscapes from her childhood home, hidden instead of destroyed. Someone decided to display them properly this time, because even invisible queens left marks, even silenced voices echoed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the act of walking away was more powerful than any throne. Alara and Kael rode for 3 weeks before finding the place that felt like home. A small valley in the northern foothills, far from major trade routes but close enough to villages for supplies. Lord Frost had offered them land, a gift for the peace Alara had brokered, and they'd accepted with the understanding that they were just settlers now. No titles, no special treatment. The house they built was modest. 2 rooms, a fireplace, windows that actually opened to let in air instead of trapping her in suffocating luxury. It was perfect. They worked side by side, learning each other's rhythms outside of crisis. Kael was meticulous about details, drove himself too hard, and made terrible jokes when he was nervous. Alara discovered she actually enjoyed physical labor, had a gift for growing things, and possessed a stubborn streak that made Kael laugh. You argued with a fence post for 20 minutes this morning, he said one evening while they ate simple stew by the fire. It was crooked. It's a fence post. That's its job. It could be crooked in a more aesthetically pleasing way. She threw a piece of bread at him. Don't judge my process. Wouldn't dream of it. He caught the bread, grinning. Though I reserve the right to find it entertaining. You're impossible. You love me anyway. She did. God help her, she absolutely did. Not the desperate, crisis-forged love from before. Something quieter now, steadier. Built on morning conversations and shared work and the knowledge that he saw her, really saw her, every single day. 3 months into their new life, a rider arrived. Alara was in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. Her hand went instinctively to the knife at her belt, old reflexes dying hard. But the rider wore northern colors, and when he dismounted, she recognized one of Frost's scouts. You're... Ma'am. He caught himself before using her old title. Lord Frost sends word. The trial's concluded. Alara's stomach clenched. And? King Roderick Hale has been found guilty of treason, torture, and crimes against the kingdom. The scout's voice was carefully neutral. He's been sentenced to life imprisonment in the northern fortress. No contact with the outside world. No chance of pardon. Not execution. Imprisonment. Alara didn't know how she felt about that. Thank you for the message. The scout nodded, mounted, and rode off without further conversation. Frost's people were good about respecting her desire for privacy. Kael emerged from the house, saw her expression. News. Roderick's convicted. Life imprisonment. He came to stand beside her, solid and warm. How do you feel? I don't know. She stared at the mountains. Part of me wanted him dead. Part of me thinks rotting in a cell for decades is worse. And the rest of you? The rest of me doesn't care anymore. She turned to face him. He doesn't get to take up space in my head. Not after everything. Fair enough. Kael kissed her forehead. Come on, dinner's burning. They went inside together, leaving news of kings and trials outside where it belonged. That night, lying in bed with Kael's arm around her and stars visible through the window, Alara let herself think about the woman she'd been. The scared girl who'd married for duty. The invisible queen who'd slowly died inside. The desperate woman who'd grabbed a sword and challenged impossible odds. She wasn't any of those people anymore. She was just Alara. Building a life that belonged to her. Making choices that served her needs instead of someone else's control. It wasn't glamorous. Wasn't the fairy tale everyone expected, but it was hers. And that made it worth. 6 months passed like water through open hands. Alara learned the rhythms of a life that belonged to her. Morning light through windows she'd chosen. Calluses from work that mattered. Nights where sleep came easy instead of fractured by fear. She planted a garden that actually grew, fixed a roof that leaked, and discovered she was good with her hands when those hands weren't being used to hold teacups at meaningless ceremonies. Kael built furniture that didn't wobble, taught himself to cook things that didn't poison them, woke from nightmares sometimes, reaching for her in the dark, and she held him through the tremors until his breathing steadied. They were both learning how to be people instead of survivors, and some days that was harder than fighting had been. But they were learning together. The letter arrived on a morning that felt like any other. Alara was harvesting vegetables when she heard the horse. Not northern colors this time. Palace livery, official, and unmistakable. Her stomach clenched with old instincts that whispered danger at the sight of anything from Valthera. The messenger dismounted, young and nervous. "Ma'am, I have correspondence from Duke Merrick, the king." He caught himself. "Sorry, still getting used to the title." Alara wiped dirt from her hands. "What does he want?" "I don't know, ma'am. Just told to deliver this personally and wait for a response if you chose to give one." He held out a sealed envelope, wax embossed with Valthera's new crest, a modification of the old one, subtle but deliberate. She took it because refusing felt childish. "Wait there." Inside the house, Kael looked up from the chair he was sanding. "Trouble?" "Maybe. Letter from Merrick." Alara broke the seal, unfolded heavy parchment covered in the new king's careful script. She read in silence, then read again because the words didn't make sense the first time. "Alara?" Kael's voice carried concern now. "What is it?" "Roderick's dying." The words felt strange in her mouth. Some kind of wasting sickness. The physicians give him maybe a month. She kept reading. "Merrick says, he's asking to see me before he dies. Saying he has things he needs to say." The silence that fell was complicated. Kael set down his sandpaper with deliberate care. "You don't have to go." "I know. He doesn't deserve your time, your presence, anything from you after what he did." "I know that too." Alara stared at the letter. "But he's dying, and part of me needs to face him one more time, not as his victim, as someone who survived him." "That's dangerous thinking." "Probably." She met Kael's eyes. "But I've spent 6 months building a life away from him, away from everything he represented. And I still feel him in my head sometimes, still hear his voice telling me I'm worthless." Her hands clenched. "Maybe seeing him powerless will finally kill that voice." Kael crossed the room, framed her face with his hands. "Or maybe it'll just hurt you more. Maybe. But I need to know." She leaned into his touch. "I need to stand in front of him one last time and prove I'm not afraid anymore." He searched her face for a long moment, then sighed, resignation and understanding mixed together. "Then I'm coming with you." "Kael, non-negotiable. You want to face your demon, fine, but you don't do it alone." His voice went hard. "Not after everything." She should argue, should tell him this was her journey, her closure to find. But the truth was she didn't want to face Roderick alone, even dying Roderick, even powerless Roderick locked in a cell. Some fears ran too deep for pride. "Okay," she kissed him softly. "Together then." They rode out the next morning. The journey back to Valthera took 5 days. 5 days of watching familiar territory emerge from distance, the mountains giving way to foothills, giving way to farmland that fed the capital's endless hunger. Alara felt her chest tighten with each mile, old memories pressing close. The last time she'd ridden this road, she'd been fleeing, running toward freedom with Kyle beside her and no idea if they'd survive. Now she was returning by choice. Riding toward the man who'd tried to destroy her, carrying the knowledge that she'd already won. It should have felt like victory. It felt like walking toward an open grave. The palace loomed on the 6th day, all white stone and gold trim and oppressive grandeur. Guards at the gate recognized them despite the simple clothes, the lack of crown and title. Word had spread. The former queen was returning. Duke Merrick met them in the courtyard personally. He'd changed in 6 months. Still carried authority, but it sat different on him now. Less arrogant, more earned. The weight of actually ruling instead of just advising had carved new lines around his eyes. Your Grace. He caught himself. Apologies, Alara. Thank you for coming. How bad is he? Straight to the point. Alara didn't have patience for pleasantries. Bad. Fading fast. Merrick's expression held something complicated. The illness is eating him from inside. Physicians say it's agonizing. He refuses medicine for the pain. Good. Cale's voice was flat. Merrick didn't argue. He's in the North Tower. We moved him from the cells when it became clear he wasn't faking. He paused. I should warn you, he's not the man you remember. The sickness has reduced him. I need to see him anyway. I understand. Merrick gestured toward the palace. I'll have someone escort you. Master Arden, you're welcome to wait in more comfortable... I'm going with her. Merrick looked between them, saw the immovable determination in both faces, and nodded. Of course. This way. The walk through the palace was surreal. Servants bowed as Alara passed. Actually bowed, showing respect they'd never given her as queen. Nobles in the corridors whispered but didn't sneer. The entire atmosphere had shifted in her absence, power dynamics rearranging themselves around her legend instead of her presence. It made her skin crawl. The North Tower was where they kept prisoners who rated better than dungeons, but worse than freedom. Roderick's room was comfortable by cell standards. A bed, a window, a chair. Nothing compared to the luxury he'd commanded as king. 2 guards stood outside. They straightened at Merrick's approach. Open it. The door swung inward, and Alara stepped through into the space where her former husband was dying. Roderick sat by the window, and Merrick hadn't been exaggerating. The man who'd once commanded kingdoms had been reduced to a shell. His skin was gray, hanging loose over bones that looked ready to break through. His hair had gone completely white. When he turned at their entrance, his eyes were sunken but still sharp with the intelligence that made him dangerous. Alara. His voice was a rasp. You came. She stayed by the door, Kyle a solid presence at her shoulder. Merrick said you wanted to talk. I'm dying. Thought that might earn me a final conversation. A ghost of his old smile. But you brought your guard dog. Worried I might lunge from my deathbed? Worried you'll try one last manipulation. Alara's voice stayed level. What do you want, Roderick? He studied her for a long moment, then laughed, wet and painful. Look at you. Standing there like you own the world, not bowing, not flinching, not showing an ounce of the fear you used to carry everywhere. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. I did that. Broke you down so thoroughly you had to rebuild from nothing. And somehow you came back stronger. I came back free. There's a difference. Is there? He shifted, wincing. You're still defined by what I did to you, still measuring yourself against the cage I built. Even your freedom is shaped by my cruelty. The words hit harder than they should have. Cale stepped forward. That's enough. It's fine. Alara touched his arm, stopping him. He's not wrong. I am shaped by what he did, by 3 years of being invisible and silenced and owned. She met Roderick's eyes. But I'm also shaped by what I survived, by choosing to fight back, by walking away when I could have stayed and let it destroy me. She paused. You made me invisible. I made myself seen. Those aren't the same thing. Roderick's expression flickered with something that might have been respect. You really have changed. I really have. She stepped closer, ignoring Cale's sharp intake of breath. So if you called me here to gloat about how I'm still your creation, you've wasted everyone's time.
I'm my own creation. You were just the obstacle I had to overcome." Silence fell, thick and weighted. Then Roderick spoke, and his voice had changed, quieter, almost human. "I didn't call you here to gloat. I called you here to apologize." Elara actually laughed. "You're dying and suddenly discovered remorse? That's convenient." "It's true." He stared at his hands, skeletal and shaking. "I spent 6 months in this tower thinking about what I did, about how I treated you, about the man I became." His gaze lifted, and I realized I destroyed the one person who might have actually made me better. "I'm not your redemption project. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything." Roderick's voice cracked. "I just need you to know that I see it now. What I did was monstrous. You deserved better. You deserved everything I refused to give you, and I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air like smoke. Elara waited for satisfaction, for vindication, for the rush of victory that should come from hearing the man who destroyed her admit fault. She felt nothing. "You're sorry." She repeated the words flatly. "After 3 years of making me invisible, after torture and manipulation and trying to execute the man I love, after setting up an elaborate trap designed to destroy me publicly. You're sorry." "Yes." "That's not enough." "I know. It doesn't undo anything, doesn't heal anything, doesn't change the fact that I still wake up sometimes expecting to be told I'm worthless." Her voice rose despite her best efforts. "Your apology is too late, too empty, and too self-serving to mean anything." Roderick nodded slowly. "You're right. All of that is true." He coughed again, harder this time. "But I needed to say it anyway. Needed you to know that I understand what I took from you, even if it changes nothing." Kael's hand found Alara's, grounding her. She took a breath, then another, forced herself to really look at the broken man in front of her. This was Roderick Hale, king, tyrant, the monster who'd haunted her for years. And he was dying alone in a tower, reduced to nothing, begging for absolution from the woman he'd tried to destroy. There was justice in that. Symmetry, even. But it didn't feel like victory. "I don't forgive you." The words came out clear and final. "I probably never will. What you did was unforgivable, and your deathbed apology doesn't change that. I understand. But I'm not going to carry you anymore either." Elara stepped back, closer to Kael. "I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of my life. I'm not going to wake up thinking about you or measure my worth against your cruelty or give you any more space in my head." She met his eyes one last time. "You don't matter to me anymore, Roderick, and that's the closest thing to forgiveness you're going to get." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. "That's more than I deserve." "It is. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." She turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Roderick. I hope whatever comes next is kinder than you were." She walked out without looking back. Kael followed, closing the door on the dying king and everything he represented. They made it 3 corridors before Alara's legs gave out. Kael caught her, eased her down to sit against the wall while her whole body shook. Not crying, she was past tears for Roderick Hale. Just trembling with the weight of 6 months of healing crashing against years of damage. "I've got you." Kael's arms wrapped around her. "I've got you. You did so good. You were amazing." "I don't feel amazing." Her voice came out muffled against his chest. "I feel exhausted." "That's allowed. You just faced the man who tried to destroy you and told him he doesn't matter anymore. You're allowed to be exhausted." He apologized. "I heard. I didn't believe him." "Neither did I." Kyle's hand moved in slow circles on her back. "But it doesn't matter if he meant it. You said what you needed to say. That's what counts." Elara pulled back enough to see his face. "How are you so calm about this? He tortured you, tried to execute you. You have more reason to hate him than anyone." "I do hate him, probably always will." Kael's expression was complicated. "But watching him waste away in that room, knowing he's going to die alone while we get to build a life together, that's punishment enough." He paused. "Plus, you told him he doesn't matter. That was better than any revenge I could have imagined." Despite everything, Elara smiled. "You're enjoying this a little too much. I'm enjoying you being free of him. There's a difference." He helped her stand. "Come on, let's get out of this palace before someone tries to make you queen again." They found Merrick in his study, reviewing what looked like trade agreements. He looked up at their entrance, assessing. How did it go? It's done. Alara's voice was steady now. Whatever he needed to say, he said it. Whatever I needed to close that chapter, I did. And now? Now we leave. Go back to our life. Forget this palace exists. Merrick nodded slowly, then reached into his desk and pulled out a small wooden box. Before you go, there's something you should have. He opened it, revealing a collection of papers. Your diplomatic work, the treaties you negotiated, the reforms you proposed that I've been implementing. He pushed the box toward her. This kingdom owes you more than it can ever repay. I wanted you to know that what you built, it's lasting, making a real difference. Alara stared at the papers, her handwriting, her ideas, her work that Roderick had buried and Merrick had resurrected. Thank you. It came out quieter than intended. That means more than you know. It's the least I could do. Merrick stood, extended his hand. You're welcome here any time, not as queen, just as someone this kingdom respects. She shook his hand, feeling the weight of finality in the gesture. Then she and Kael walked out of the palace for the last time. The ride home took 6 days again, but it felt shorter somehow. They talked more this time, about Roderick's apology, about forgiveness and closure, about what it meant to carry scars and whether healing ever really finished. Kael shared pieces of his past she hadn't heard before, a childhood spent moving between military camps, parents who loved war more than him, the loneliness that made him good at strategy because people were puzzles to solve. Alara told him about the girl she'd been before marriage, fierce and hopeful and naive enough to think duty mattered more than happiness. How that girl had died slowly in Roderick's palace, and how she was still figuring out who'd emerged from the ashes. You're someone strong, Kael said on the 4th night, firelight painting his face gold. Someone who survived hell and chose kindness anyway. Someone who fights for what matters. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm constantly one wrong step from falling apart. That's what strength is. Staying together when falling apart would be easier. He pulled her close. You're the strongest person I know, Alara, even when you can't see it. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the moments she'd broken, all the times fear had won, all the ways she was still damaged. But looking at Kael's face, seeing the absolute certainty there, she let herself believe it, just a little. They reached their valley on the 7th day. The house sat exactly as they'd left it, small and imperfect and completely theirs. The garden had grown in their absence, vegetables ripening, weeds taking over in places. It would need work to restore. Alara had never been happier to see anything in her life. Home. The word felt strange, foreign. I can't believe I'm calling this home. Better than a palace? Kael asked, already dismounting. Better than anywhere. She slid down, legs protesting after days of riding. Better than I ever imagined having. They spent the evening in comfortable silence, unpacking, checking the house for damage, making simple dinner over the fire, all the mundane tasks that meant safety and permanence and a life that belonged to them. Later, lying in bed with stars visible through the window, Kael spoke into the darkness. Do you regret it? Any of it? Alara thought about the question, about 3 years of marriage that nearly destroyed her, about falling in love with a man who saw her when everyone else looked through her, about challenging a king to combat and walking away from a crown most people would kill for. No. The answer came easily. It was hell. It nearly broke me. But it brought me here, to you, to this life. So no, I don't regret it. Even Roderick? Especially Roderick, because surviving him proved I'm stronger than I thought. She turned to face Kael. He tried to make me invisible. I made myself unforgettable. That's not something I regret. Kael kissed her, slow and thorough. You are unforgettable. Always were. He was just too blind to see it. His loss. Absolutely his loss. They made love like people who'd earned each other. No desperation this time, no fear of discovery. Just want and trust, and the knowledge that tomorrow they'd wake up together, and the day after that, and every day following. It was everything Alara had never let herself hope for. Roderick Hale died 3 weeks later. The news came via messenger, brief and official. The former king had passed in his sleep. There would be a modest funeral, and then his name would be stricken from official honors in accordance with his conviction. Alara read the notice once, then burned it in the fireplace. "You okay?" Kyle asked from the doorway. "Yeah." She watched the paper curl and blacken. "I think I am." No secret relief? No vindication? Just closure. Alara turned to face him. He's gone. Really gone. And I'm still here, still building this life. He doesn't get to take up any more space. Kyle crossed the room, pulled her into his arms. "You're free." "I've been free for months." "No, you've been away from him. There's a difference." He rested his chin on her head. "Now he's gone completely. No possibility of return, no final confrontations, just gone. That's different." He was right. Something inside her chest loosened, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying finally releasing. Roderick was dead. The man who'd owned her for 3 years, who'd tried to destroy her, who'd haunted her even in freedom, gone. She was truly, completely, finally free. The tears came then. Not for Roderick, never for him, but for the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, the years of pain and the hard-won peace on the other side. Cale held her through it, solid and sure, while she cried out 3 years of grief she'd never let herself feel. When the tears stopped, she felt lighter, emptied out, clean. "Thank you." Her voice was rough. "For what?" "For seeing me. For fighting for me. For following me to this ridiculous valley and building a life that makes no sense by palace standards but feels perfect anyway. You make it sound like sacrifice. This is the best thing I've ever done." He pulled back to look at her. "I love you, Alara, the real you. Not the queen, not the symbol, not the woman shaped by survival, just you. I love you too." Simple words, profound truth. More than I thought I could love anything. They stood there in their small house, holding each other while the news of a dead king burned to ash, and Alara felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She was no longer Queen Alara Vance, no longer Roderick's wife, no longer invisible or silenced or owned. She was just Alara, building a garden, learning to be happy, loving a man who saw her worth when the entire world had decided she had none. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Spring came to the valley with unusual warmth. Alara planted new crops while Kyle expanded the house, adding a workroom where he could craft furniture to sell in nearby villages. They'd found a rhythm, a sustainable pattern of life that didn't require crowns or titles. Just work and love and the slow accumulation of ordinary days that added up to something extraordinary. One morning, 3 months after Roderick's death, Alara woke to find Kyle already outside. She dressed and joined him, following the sound of hammering to where he was building something new in the garden. "What's this?" She studied the wooden framework taking shape. "Trellis, for climbing plants." He didn't look up, focused on getting the joints perfect. "Thought it might be nice. Add some vertical interest." Alara watched him work, this man who'd given up everything to build a quiet life with her. No glory, no recognition, just honest labor and shared meals and nights spent talking about everything and nothing. "Kyle." "Yeah?" He secured another joint, tested its strength. "I'm pregnant." The hammer slipped from his hands. He turned slowly, eyes wide. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 2 months, I think. I wasn't sure, but I've been sick in the mornings and I'm late," and she was babbling now. "I know we never talked about this, and maybe it's too soon and the house is small, but..." Kyle crossed the space between them in 2 strides and kissed her so hard she forgot what she was saying. When he pulled back, he was grinning like sunrise. "A baby. We're having a baby. We're having a baby." Saying it out loud made it real, terrifying, wonderful. "Are you okay with this? I know it's not planned. It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole ridiculous, beautiful life is perfect." He dropped to his knees, pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hi in there. I'm your father. I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I'll try really hard not to screw you up." Alara laughed, threading her fingers through his hair. "We'll figure it out together. Together." He looked up at her, eyes bright. "I like the sound of that." They spent the day making plans, expanding the house further, finding a midwife in the nearest village, talking about names and futures and all the terrifying, wonderful possibilities that came with creating life. That night, Alara lay in bed with Kael's hand on her stomach, both of them quiet with wonder. "What do you think they'll be like?" Kael asked. "Stubborn, if they're anything like either of us. Fierce, brave, willing to challenge kings." "Let's hope they don't have to." Alara covered his hand with hers. "Let's hope they grow up in a world where they're seen and valued from the start. We'll make sure of it." His voice carried absolute certainty. "This child is going to know they matter, every single day." Alara closed her eyes, feeling the future unfold in possibilities instead of predetermined paths. She'd been a daughter sold to pay debts, a wife rendered invisible, a queen who'd fought for freedom and walked away from power. Now she was going to be a mother, building a life on her own terms, teaching her child that worth came from within, not from titles or crowns or anyone's approval. It was the kind of ending she never could have imagined in Roderick's palace. It was the kind of beginning she'd needed all along. 7 months later, on a morning when frost painted the valley white, Alara gave birth to a daughter. The labor was brutal. 14 hours of pain that made fighting Roderick look easy. But when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Alara forgot every second of agony. "She's perfect." Kael's voice was thick with tears. "Absolutely perfect." The baby had dark hair and furious eyes and lungs that could wake the entire valley. She was red and wrinkled and looked nothing like either of them. She was the most beautiful thing Alara had ever seen. "What should we name her?" Kael asked. Alara looked down at her daughter, this tiny, fierce creature who'd already survived the trauma of birth and was screaming her displeasure at the world. "Hope." The name came without thought. Her name is Hope, because that's what she represented. Hope that the future could be different. Hope that children could grow up knowing their worth. Hope that love was possible even after everything tried to destroy it. Kael kissed Alara's forehead. "Hope. I love it. Hope Arden." Alara tested the full name. "What do you think, little one? Does that suit you?" The baby stopped crying long enough to stare at her with unfocused eyes. Then she yawned, tiny and fierce, and Alara's heart cracked open with more love than she thought possible. This was it. This was what freedom looked like. Not escape, not revenge, not victory over enemies, just a small house in a quiet valley, a man who saw her worth, and a daughter who would never know what it felt like to be invisible. This was the ending Roderick could never have imagined when he tried to break her. This was the beginning she'd earned through surviving him. Years passed in the valley. Hope grew from infant to toddler to fierce little girl who climbed trees and asked impossible questions and refused to accept easy answers. She had Alara's stubbornness and Kael's strategic mind, and together those traits made her absolutely unstoppable. Alara taught her to garden, to read, to think critically about the world. Kael taught her to build things, to defend herself, to question authority when it deserved questioning. Together they raised a daughter who knew her worth was inherent, not granted by anyone's approval. Sometimes traders passed through the valley with news from Valthera. Duke Merrick was proving a competent king, implementing reforms that actually helped common people. The northern territories thrived under the peace Alara had brokered. The kingdom was healing, slowly, from decades of Roderick's tyranny. Alara was glad to hear it, but it felt distant, like news from another world. A world she'd left behind completely. Her world was here. Morning coffee with Kael while Hope destroyed breakfast. Afternoon work in the garden while their daughter played with neighbors' children. Evening stories by the fire, all three of them tangled together on the couch Kael had built. It was ordinary, unglamorous, exactly what she'd needed. On Hope's 5th birthday, Alara stood in the garden and watched her daughter race through flowers with friends, shrieking with laughter. Kael came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different this is from what I imagined." She leaned back against him. "I thought I wanted to matter, to be important, to change kingdoms." "You did change a kingdom. Then you left it behind to build something better. A garden and a daughter? A life where you're happy. That's better than any throne." He kissed her neck. "Do you ever regret it? Walking away from power?" Alara watched Hope spin in circles, arms spread wide, completely unself-conscious in her joy.
No, the answer came easily. Power is hollow if you're not free to be yourself. I'd rather have this, real love, real purpose, real connection, than rule the entire world from a golden cage. Even knowing what you gave up? Especially knowing what I gave up. Because I chose this. Every part of it. And that choice matters more than any crown. They stood together watching their daughter play, the sun warm on their faces, the future stretching ahead in possibilities instead of predetermined paths. This was the life Alara had fought for, had bled for, had walked away from everything to claim. It wasn't the fairy tale people expected. Wasn't the story of a rescued princess or a triumphant queen. It was the story of a woman who'd been rendered invisible, who'd found her voice in the darkest moments, who'd chosen freedom over power and love over revenge. It was her story, completely and finally hers, and that made it the most important story of all. That evening, after Hope had been tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Alara sat on the porch watching stars emerge. Kale joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, content in the peace they'd built. "Do you think she'll understand?" Alara asked eventually. "When she's older, when she learns about who I was." "You mean when she learns her mother challenged a king to single combat and walked away from a throne?" Kale's smile was audible. "Yeah, I think she'll understand. Probably be impossibly proud. Or horrified by how reckless I was." "She's your daughter. Reckless is in her blood." He took her hand. "But she'll understand that you did what you had to do, that you chose freedom over safety. That's a lesson worth learning." Alara squeezed his fingers. "What about you? Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd never met me?" "Simpler, safer, infinitely more boring." He turned to look at her. "You turned my entire world upside down, Alara. Best thing that ever happened to me. Even the parts where we nearly died? Especially those parts. They proved what we were willing to risk for each other." He paused. "Though I could have done without the torture." "Fair point." They lapsed back into silence, watching the valley settle into night. This was peace. Real, hard-won, imperfect peace, built on the ruins of everything that had tried to destroy them, and stronger because of it. Alara thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd walked into marriage believing duty mattered more than happiness. About the woman she'd become. Invisible, silenced, slowly dying inside. About the person she'd fought to be, fierce, unbreakable, finally free. All of those versions existed inside her still. The naive girl, the broken wife, the desperate fighter. But they didn't define her anymore. She was defined by what she'd built after surviving them all. A life of her own choosing. Love that saw her completely. A daughter who would never know what it felt like to be invisible. That was worth more than any crown. That was worth everything. As the stars brightened overhead and Kael's thumb traced circles on her palm and their daughter slept safe in the house they'd built together, Alara finally let go of the last piece of who she'd been forced to be. She wasn't Queen Alara Vance anymore. She wasn't Roderick's invisible wife. She wasn't even the woman who challenged a king and walked away. She was just Alara, living freely, loving deeply, building a future that belonged to nobody but herself. And in the end, that was the only throne that mattered, the only crown worth wearing, the only victory that would last. Years later, when Hope was grown and building her own life, she would ask her mother about the scars, the thin white lines mapping Alara's ribs and shoulder and thigh, evidence of battles fought and survived. And Alara would tell her daughter the truth, that she'd been broken once, that she'd been rendered invisible by someone who should have protected her, that she'd found the strength to fight back when fighting seemed impossible. But most importantly, she would tell Hope that the scars weren't the story. The story was what came after, the choosing of freedom over safety, the building of love from ashes, the claiming of a life that belonged to her completely. The scars were just proof she'd survived long enough to find it, and Hope, fierce and stubborn and absolutely her mother's daughter, would understand. Because that's what Alara and Kael had given her. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. The knowledge that worth comes from within. That freedom is worth fighting for. That love, real love, sees you completely even when the world tries to make you invisible. Those lessons would carry Hope through her own battles, her own choices,
her own journey toward becoming whoever she decided to be. And somewhere in a quiet valley, Alara and Kael would watch their daughter walk her own path with pride and hope, and the certainty that they'd given her something Roderick could never understand: the freedom to be completely, unapologetically, magnificently herself. That was the real ending. Not revenge or triumph or kingdoms saved, just love, freely given, just life, fully lived, just one woman's journey from invisible to unforgettable, and the family she built from the ashes of everything that tried to destroy her. It wasn't the ending anyone expected. It was better, because it was real.